Tēnā koutou katoa. Nau mai, haere mai ki Whangarei takiwā hui. Tai te rua tekau mā rima, hautu te rangi rua mano, rua tekau mā tahi. Welcome to our Whangarei District Council meeting, Thursday, the 25th of March, 2021. I would like to ask Councillor Peters to open our meeting with a karakia.
Tui e runga, tui I raro, tui I ngāko kia pātiki tahi, kia kimihia, kia rātua, kia maramataka, maramatangi, kia mohioranga, ti heiwa mauhiora. Binding all that's above and before us, binding all that's below and after us, binding our collective hearts as they may beat in unison, as we search out, as we seek after enlightenment and clarity and seize the breath of life.
Kia ora, Councillor Peters. That's just some housekeeping matters. We have two additional speakers to our public forum in addition to our speaker who was in the agenda. And so we'll be having Frank Newman, Terry Burkhart and Len Bristow. Item 7.7 on our agenda had the easement request for Marsden Maritime Holdings has been withdrawn at the applicant's request for this meeting and it will be coming to a future meeting. I'd like to note also, of course, that our meeting will be live streamed today and we have numerous members of media here to record our session. We also have Councillor Innes attending our meeting electronically and he's on the screen. We have an apology from Councillor Golightly. Can I have somebody move that Councillor Golightly, we've got Councillor Cutforth moving that her apology be accepted and Councillor Peters is seconding. I'll put that in motion. Those in favour, aye.
Aye.
Against? Carried. Councillors, just a reminder also for any items on the agenda today, if you have an interest in the item, if you could declare that at the beginning of the item. So we have our public forum as the first item on our agenda, and as I said, Frank Newman is here to present the petition on holding a referendum on one or more Māori wards for the next two train elections commencing 2022. A very warm welcome to you, Frank.
Thank you.
Who made it just in time despite all of the traffic. Frank, sorry, I'm sure that you don't need any rules to be given to you, but it is a 5 minutes speaking slot and we'll commence now.
Good morning, Councillors. Apologies from John Bain and Robin Breed for not attending here in person. Otherwise, they would be delivering this to you. I'm actually pleased to talk to the petition that has been delivered on behalf of Democracy York. Standing behind me today are some 5,133 people who signed the petition. I take this opportunity to thank them personally. They are part of more than 15,000 people who signed the petitions, the others being from the Whangarei District Council and the Norfolk Regional Council. And I just need to point out that 15,000 is more than twice the number that actually voted in the recent NRC by-election. I just want to be clear what this petition is calling for. It's actually calling for a referendum to be held as to whether the WDC should have Māori wards. It is not a petition for or against Māori wards. It's calling for a referendum so everyone can have a say. In our view, a referendum is the best way to put the pros and cons of the issue for the public, so the community as a whole can make an informed and rational decision without shouting, without anger, and without vitriol. It's also the best way to deal with controversial decisions. And I just need to remind councillors that it was simply 6 years ago that the Whangarei decision was put to a local referendum. It was in June 2015, and you can see the result occurring today. It's about democracy for us, and whatever the public want is fine by us, but at least the public should have a say. We were required to obtain 3,080 signatures, and that's 5% of the registered voters. The support we received was actually overwhelming. We stopped collecting 3 weeks before the close date because we knew we were well within the 5% range. In fact, we collected the 5,133, which was 8.3% of the registered voters. And in my view, we would have received easily 10% had we continued collecting. In my view, in my recollection, it's the largest paper petition ever presented to the local council. And it's an old school petition. It's actually you signing on the dotted line. It's not one of these new fancy online petitions where you keep your warrior to sign up. It was done the old way, old school. Everyone who signed was on the Whangarei electoral roll. And that's been verified by your electoral officer. There are 3 takeaways that I took from this petition, and that is that the public want to be involved in the decision, and they feel very strongly that they should be involved. Secondly, some were of the view that the need for Maori wards had not been demonstrated, and it needed to be demonstrated. And I remember sitting here with the Seminole, who actually had 4 terms as mayor, and sitting here with Councillor Sutherland, who was a very strong advocate for Maori issues. I think he was actually keeping the protocol correctly at one stage. The third thing, and I was really heartened by this, that people want to be united by the things we have in common and not divided by our differences. And I'll tell you what they're doing. They're looking to councillors for that sort of leadership. They want to be united by the things we have in common, not divided by our differences. And that was the key takeaway that I took from it all. I just want to reflect on where we are now with the whole thing. And as you know, the law's been changed, so there's no longer the binding aspect to our petition. The responsibility for consultation now falls back on you. They've kicked the can down here. And that's where it lies. The rules have changed, and I think that means you need to revisit the decision, because no longer is there the backstop that people like us have the opportunity to force a binding referendum. The rules have changed, you should reconsider. The responsibility is now yours. Just in conclusion, 5,133 people have asked the council to hold the referendum. That call should not be ignored. It's an important decision. It's got very long-lasting implications. And lastly, it's an issue that's full of high passions and emotions and has the potential to divide the community it already has, and it's got the potential to divide them even more. And I think that's very dangerous. These are compelling reasons alone, in my view, why this should be put out to a public referendum. But there's a more fundamental reason too. That is, in a democracy, the voting system belongs to the electors, not the elected. It should only change the system when the council has a mandate to do so. And that's why the citizens' veto was included in the Electoral Act with section 19ZB, and why it still exists in section 29 when councils change from first past the post to STP. It's there as a safeguard. In my view, and in our view, this is a very significant issue, much more important in our view than the Whangarei, and certainly more important than water fluoridation, which is now being considered for a referendum, as I read in yesterday's meeting. Surely something as fundamental as the way the community is elected should be put to the community. And this petition is putting to the test what democracy really means in our district. I thank the councillors and Mayor again for the opportunity to have it say.
Thank you, Frank. I did allow a little extra time out of courtesy. Thank you. And can I just remind everybody in the room, in particular the members of the gallery, please, this is a council meeting and we would ask you to respect our meeting with a little bit of silence. If you are happy with something, can I get you to practice this? Which is the deaf way of applauding, and it's a beautiful way of acknowledging something. If you're not happy with something, perhaps silently do that. But please, I do ask that you respect this space. Thank you. Councillors, our next speaker in the public forum is Terry Burkhart. Terry, welcome to you. Again, your time is 5 minutes for your presentation, and your time begins now. Welcome, Terry.
Maori wars are only the beginning of an acknowledgement of the treaty obligations and relationships as treaty partners. The establishment of Maori wards acknowledge that Maori have a specific and unique role to play in local government decision making. There is no guarantee that the Maori Standing Committee that does not represent all Maori in the district will be in existence in the next term of council. Maori wards may mitigate the situation somewhat. In research titled Creating Treaty-Based Local Government in New Zealand, they argue that only a new treaty-based system of local government that incorporated distinctive Maori ways of governance would protect the rights of New Zealand Maori to fair and effective representation that stem from the Treaty of Waitangi. I would like to address a number of statements that were made by several councillors previously. Quote, I can talk about the disenfranchisement, the things, the different aspects of being a minority on this council, being the only Italian, may I add. That councillor was not supported by over 95% of the electors in the last election. Is that really democracy? I found that statement offensive and very disturbing, comparing oneself to that of the plight of Māoridom, fighting for over 180 years to have our rights truly recognised and acknowledged. Organised and concerted campaigns by anti-Māori groups like Hobson's Pledge, New Zealand Centre for Political Research, Taxpayers Union and Democracy Northland leads those without other information to question whether Māori representation is needed or democratic, which is a red herring. In 2017, 5 councils voted in favour of establishing Māori wards. In 2018, all 5 of those decisions were overturned by polls. The polls have reduced complex issues of voice and representation to a simple binary choice, which, by encouraging people to take sides, damages race relations. The anti-Māori group Democracy Northland has been dishonest, claiming that many Māori supported their petition. When collecting signatures, they conveniently omitted to inform them that the council had already decided to establish Māori wards for the next election, and that the petition was a tool to revoke that decision. A poll requested by a minority of our councillors at Democracy Northland is a racially discriminatory mechanism. Quote, I will just remind you that we have a large Indian community. We have a large Chinese community. There's Filipinos. There's Yugoslavs. There's Italians. We have one on our council, you know. Are we going to have a ward for every ethnicity we have in this district? That councillor was not supported by over 98% of the electors in the last election. Is that really democracy? Perhaps people of this view do not understand or wish not to understand the Treaty of Waitangi and Crown obligations. Do not support treaty-based...
It's 1 minute to go, Terry.
Okay. Treaty-based local government relationships, and unfortunately seek to undermine our Māori rights. In their guest posts to the anti-Māori group Democracy Northland's website, quote, WTC will have 3 Māori wards based on population. Those elected to these wards are voted in by only those on the Maori roll, yet they get to vote on all issues of council. That councillor was not supported by over 96% of the electors in the last election. Is that really democracy? However, his statement is a double standard. He was elected by people only in a certain geographic area in the district, yet he gets to vote on all the issues of council. Is this a case of white privilege? Finally, for Councillors Coccarello, Breed, Deming, Hulse and the organisers of the anti-Maori group Democracy Northland, I would like to recall the words of Chief Justice Eddie Jury. We, Maori, must not forget that the treaty is not just a Bill of Rights for Maori. It is a Bill of Rights for Pākehā too. It is the treaty that gives Pākehā the right to be here. Without the treaty, there would be no lawful authority for Pākehā presence in this part of the South Pacific. We, Maori, must remember that if we are tangata whenua, the original people, then Pākehā are tangata tiriti, those who belong to the land by the right of that treaty. Oh, and just one last thing. Ngāpuhi did not seek sovereignty. Let that sink in. Thank you.
Terry. We've got a problem with the flickering light, so I'm trying to get that fixed. Councillors, our final speaker this morning in the public forum is Len Bristow. There he is.
First of all, representative decision making by the people for the many is no longer acceptable. Now Maori making decisions for Maori has never been the choice for Maori. Maori Wards is another step to give Maori equity in local government decision making. Just like Maori seats in national government, no different, no different. Maori Wards provide a Maori voice, a dedicated space, and a local government decision making. While Te Kāreara is an achievement for Maori to participate more equitably, it is not enough on its own. Hapu from around Whangarei have spoken loudly, clearly to you all. As district councillors, please heed the call. Be brave, hold the same line. Vote Maori votes or cross the floor if you did not support Maori Wards last time. Council voted and vote to support Maori Wards show that we are mature district that understand and support diversity in representative decision making in council. Support the voice of local Maori and the vote for Maori Wards. Look, people, Maori used to do decisions, make decisions with a good firm handshake and a home. Our people went further to put their name on a document that doesn't mean nothing. That's where this is all about. If that's not racism, what is? And all the councils that made decisions to support Maori Wards, I can't say enough. But those who do revoke their votes and vote against it, you're measured on those things. You're measured on the things that you do and you say. If I say something to whoever, I mean what I say. I hope to think that the rest of the councillors, when they voted for this, that they meant what they said. Norela, sure, I don't need 5 minutes. Sure.
Councillors, that does bring to us a conclusion of the public forum. You will note, of course, there is also the response to our previous speakers in last month's public forum are included in the papers. Do we have...
Yes,
yes, yes, briefly. Just checking on Marty Ruth is available to come to item 5.1, the police report, and Area Commander Marty is respectfully waiting outside. Here he is. Tēnā koe, Marty. Welcome. Thank you. I'm sorry we didn't have a seat for you in the public forum. And the floor is yours.
Right, everyone, how are you all? Since our last chat, our last discussion, probably not much to report. Touch wood, we've had we've had an absence of really serious crime in Whangarei, which is nice. And long may it continue. Serious crime happening in those which is burglary, car theft, and other things to stay in decline. We are seeing a bulge, an increase in low-level crime, that is to say, petrol drive-offs, shoplifting and the like, general thefts. Tsunami, to be well aware of that, we had a debrief yesterday, the partnership debrief, I think pretty well, nothing really in the COVID space. And we've got a meeting tomorrow. There is some, a lot of discussion around violence in schools, some stuff on the cycle track, which will be with school principals and partners tomorrow. So that's really all I've got. There's not really much that I want to occupy your time with. The floor is yours.
Thank you, Marty. Councillors, questions for Marty? Councillor Benny?
Yeah, I'll go. You've drawn a crowd today, Marty. You're a popular man.
Yeah.
I'm just interested. Have you read the book Ganglands?
I think I read the editorial and a few other things.
Okay, really interesting, and a real indictment on Northland and Auckland in relation to meth scene. And it was just an interesting, really interesting book about the issues of meth in Northland especially. But I was just interested. I wanted to see you before this, but didn't have the opportunity. So you mentioned about the violence on the cycle track and some of the violence in town here. One of the concerns, and I think we brought it up before, is about our City Safe, and for the members of the public, City Safe is an organisation, employees of council who you will see around town, and our concern is that they don't take over the position of the police, and that's in relation to beat constables, community constables, and that sort of thing. And I know that your answer will be that the police are there to support them, and they are the eyes of the police, but the increased violence, what measures are you taking to address that?
Well, first of all, you have to have an increased measure of violence, and you have it. So we've done a scan, and there's nothing huge in comparison to recent years. We've had 10 incidents at school in the last, since January. 8 of them have been on school grounds, 2 of them have been on the cycle track. So I'm not going to get into the different forums that bring this to the attention of everyone's eyes and ears. But if it's not reported to us, and again, that doesn't mean that we don't look into it, and we are looking into it, hence the meeting tonight. But in terms of reports to us, 8 total in the schools since January. They're 9 assaults and fighting, and only 2 on the cycle track. So we've already put some staff out, and look, we just need to listen to the principals tomorrow and all those that are interested in coming to the meeting and see what they can see. So I think there's some wider issues here. There's some Maori issues and some truancy stuff, and it's not just people's 5-minute snapshot of what the problem might be. So let's have a chat tomorrow.
And do you think that the cycle track has created a situation where these sorts of things can happen, or would they just take it somewhere else anyway?
No, you confront crime, as you know, and sometimes you just move it to another place. So you've got to get underneath and see what the problems are, try to deal with the issues rather than just Facebook, the flooding the place with blue shirts, and you move the problem somewhere else, so you're not solving it. So let's have a chat tomorrow and a good listen and see what the community's got to say and what everyone's got to say.
And just one last question. So, and I'm not aware now. So, campus cop that used to be in existence, do they still exist? Boys High School, girls used to go between the two?
No, so what we've done is we've increased our school community officers by 4. So it was sergeant before now, we used to have 1 for the last 3 or 4 years. That was in Anderson. He's the sergeant in charge of youth services, that particular branch of youth. So we've 4 school community officers full-time here in Whangarei, as well as a whole range of other. So that particular part of the police is pretty good growth spurt.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Benny. Councillor Peters.
Last week I met with Vera Wilkinson, and she's particularly concerned about the footpath along Bank Street, where older people are trying to walk to town, and cyclists are using the footpath, and they're becoming afraid to use that footpath. So I'm hoping that your consultation tomorrow will take that into consideration, or if she's not coming, that you ring her up and have a talk with the agency, Beryl Wilkinson.
Thank you, Councillor Peters.
Also mentioned that it's happening in Maori as well, on the long footpath. Older people are particularly fragile for it, and if there's a bike whizzing by, it's actually quite dangerous for them.
Yeah. I totally get that sort of view. We've got a range of modern enhancements, e-scooters and all sorts of things, and now we're using footpaths, and obviously it's a balance. Just got to find it.
Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Peters. Councillor Cooper, then Councillor Martin.
Marty Ken Cooper, Whangarei Ward. Thank you for the help that the assistance of police gave with the vehicles on beaches. Some appreciate it. Was noted. I'd like to just discuss a little bit more on that. Even with their help, there were some significant issues, and I'd like to keep them in front of you. We have Easter coming up, and there will be an influx of holiday makers, and we will have those same problems again. And if you could, in the absence of major crime somewhere else, send some people down our way, we would be grateful. Thanks for watching.
Thank you, Councillor Cooper. Councillor Martin.
With the schools, we have the trouble that's going on. We have the handicap, graduate schools all over the place. Do they keep a register of all the incidents of health and safety register so they can give them to you so that you know exactly what's going on there?
Yeah, so we meet with all principals 4 months ago, looking all around to a communication treaty, and quite simply we want to focus the problems and the demand they have. So what we've got is a new principal, and perhaps we should have reached out to her a little bit sooner. Not aware of a register to answer your question, but so we've seen a lot of stuff on Facebook and different forums that does not compare with what we know in terms of complaints. So I'm assuming they do have something. I can't answer the question what they do.
I just thought it was helpful for you.
Yeah, I prefer they just ring us, just make a complaint or have a discussion. That's just from my point of view, that's the way you make the wheels turn. So we'll be talking to them tomorrow, just about it. So please let us know. If you don't let us know.
There's a huge number of kids that are just walking into school somehow. If they're out, they're probably going to be doing them with something.
Yeah, look, truancy is a part of this, I'm sure it is.
Thank you, Councillor Martin. Councillor Whangarei.
Marty, look, there's in our reporting that we get from CitySafe, there seems to be an increase in the drunken and disorderly behaviour. From your side, are you seeing that increase as well?
I haven't had a good look at it, to be honest with you, but we've got a couple of hot spots that I think you're aware of that are causing us repeats in terms of having to go back there all the time and sort some alcohol out of farm out. And there's process for that and afford for that particular problem. And we're a long way down that path.
And another hat I wear, but more about domestic violence. We hear a lot about it on the news, to saying how it's increasing in other areas and how there's other issues in other areas. How does Whangarei compare to? And I know it's a bad statistic to say, but how does Whangarei compare to other areas?
I wouldn't say we were well over the top, but our family harm demand is huge. It is significant. It occupies a lot of our frontline resources for all the right reasons. It's very fickle, up and down, and the general trend is increasing.
How are our police force dealing with these issues from an emotional point? Because sometimes that can be quite hard for them to deal with.
Yeah, it's tough if you just go, if you're one shift, you're just going from one family harm incident to another. And we've got a number of strategies we're trying to implement. We've got a big team working on that in terms of the wraparound, so we're not going back to the same places again. But it's huge undertaking, interagency response, lifting a few rocks in terms of what are the problems you've got that brings us to the attention of us in terms of being accountable. And there's so much going on in that space, we haven't got the time. There's so much work going on nationally in districts, some great stuff coming out of that.
From a national view, how is your accessing of getting more police to Northland going?
Look, I think we've done well. Like I said, out of the P21, which was the last government's contribution to policing, we got 84 police officers in Northland. That's still coming through. Far north, my brother up in far north Rickfield, Inspector Rickfield, is getting his compliment coming through. So he's getting more new recruits coming out of the wings. We've pretty much got ours in Whangarei, and it's proving to be very, very good for us. So the investment in youth, organised crime, precision targeting teams, CLB, and some other staff has been good for us. Very good. Yeah.
Thank you.
I could always do with 50 more. So everyone's got any influence there.
You take retired councillors.
Yeah.
Councillors, any further questions? Councillor Innes, anything? Thank you, Marty. Can you take our thanks to your team for the work that they're doing in keeping our community safe? Really appreciate it, and it's a big task that you do, and we appreciate all the work that goes in.
Appreciate the time.
Thank you. We need somebody to move the motion that Council note the report. Councillor Martin is moving, Councillor Pokorolo is seconding. Those in favour, aye. Against, carried. Our next item, item 6.1, the minutes of our meeting held on 25th of February 2021, including the confidential portion. Don't somebody move that they're a true and correct record? Councillor Benny is moving, Councillor Peters is seconding. Any corrections or amendments required to those minutes? I'll put that motion. Those in favour, aye. Against, carried. Item 6.2, the minutes of our meeting held on the 24th of February. Can I have somebody move that they're a true and correct record of those proceedings? Councillor Pokorolo is moving, Councillor Peters is seconding. Any corrections required? I'll put that motion. Those in favour, aye. Aye. Against, carried. Item 7.1, notices of motion. We have two notices. We will be taking these, of course, in parts. The first motion is from Councillor Pokorolo.
I would like to move the motion that it states that the council approves. The motion to revoke previous resolution, that the following resolution of Council the 3rd of November 2020, that Council approves the establishment of Maori wards for the 2022 and 2025 elections, be rescinded.
Do we have a seconder for that motion? Councillor Reid. Councillor Kokorua.
Thank you, Your Worship. Now, hopefully everyone's had a chance to read what I put together, and I have to reiterate that this is not and should never be taken as a racial act and should never be taken as discriminating against Maori. Should never be taken that. This is about process and about policy. If you've read the agenda, you'll see the background in there, where it starts and it goes about the 19th of August, 24th of September, 29th of October, the 3rd of November when the decision's actually made. Under all those, we are under a different act. An act which actually allowed the public to have a say. Allowed the public to turn around and say, hey council, we would like you to rethink this. Not that you will throw it out, but you will rethink it. However, as of the 1st of March, Minister Mahuta, with her amendment bill, changed the rules. So it basically meant that a petition that was to be put to councils, and it was put to council in the correct time, could be ignored. And ignored solely because of one amendment. I'm asking you to relook at this. I'm asking you to bring it back out onto the table so the public can actually have the discussion about it. If you look at the laws that are put in there, under Section 14 of the Local Government Act says, a local authority should conduct its businesses open, transparent and democracy accountable manner, and give effect to its identified priorities and desired outcomes in an efficient and effective manner. And when you start looking through the Local Government Act and what it actually says about discussions and decisions, under Section 74, it says a local authority must, in the course of the decision-making process, in relation to a matter, give consideration to the views and preferences of persons likely to be affected by or to have an interest in the matter. So this is our whole community. This is dealing with our whole community. This is dealing with how our public change our election process, or what we've got involved in here. And when it talks about, under Section 81, it talks about a local authority must establish and maintain processes to provide opportunities for Maori to contribute to the decision-making process of the local authority. Not individual hapus. Maori. And Terry Burkhart rightly said, a standing committee does not represent all. So we have an issue here. Within the motion that we made in November, and within the discussion documents, it clearly states that the only people that were consulted was Te Karea, was our hapu, or our local hapus. And there are some of the families of Whangarei which have been excluded from Te Karea and involvement in them. So it becomes very hard when you have the council saying, we've just made discussions, we've done communication, when we've only discussed with one group of people. We haven't actually gone out to Māoridom completely. We haven't even gone out to our whole community. Now, I say that because former MP Ian Peters, who came into the council on the 3rd of November, he turned around and said, I didn't realise it had gone this far. So he wasn't even in the know of the discussions going past. And this is someone who is well connected within our community, within our Maori community. So it is amazing how we can make a decision which says we're going to have Maori wards, yet we haven't discussed it with our community. We haven't actually been involved with our community. Hence the reason I'm asking for this motion to be rescinded. Now, what changes, even bigger after the bill had made changes? We have our own significance and engagement policy. And our own significant and engagement policy states, on every issue requiring a decision, the degree of significance will be considered using this policy. To determine the degree of significance of a decision, we apply a criteria set out below, and it goes through the things such as impact to council's direction, change in council's current level of service, level of public impact and or interest, impact on council's capability. Then it talks about financials and going forward. Because of our significance and engagement policy, we have already triggered one of those aspects, which is the 5,133 verified electors who have stated they want this put a petition in. 5,133. We've also had a letter of support, I believe, from Kevin Gross, which was approximately 3,000 signatures. Now, they were unverified, but there were 3,000 signatures. In talking with Democracy Northland, the 5,133 is actually a smaller number than what was actually received in Whangarei. So that definitely covers the level of interest amongst our community. 100%. And by the number of people that are here, shows very clearly the interest of what the people want to be involved in. Now, when we start looking at significant engagement, we start looking at other things, such as how is our council going to be made up? There's been discussions that if we go with Maori wards, there's going to be 3 Maori councillors. There's going to be 2 Maori councillors. There may be 1 Maori councillor. Now, when that was brought to Te Kāre, they thought that was unfair. However, that decision hasn't even been brought up to the public as of yet. And this is a decision that needs to be brought up to the public. That's why this motion has to be rescinded, so that this discussion can actually happen in an open, transparent and democratic manner. We need to have our people on side. Any decision that this council makes which is greatly going to affect the way it processes information, the way it deals with our public, needs to be consulted with. You would be silly to do otherwise. Now, there are people out there who will turn around and say, oh, Vince, you just come up and you're grandstanding right now. Well, no, I'm not. Right from the word go in 2007, I have been saying the same thing. Democracy needs to happen amongst our people. We need to have their say in our decision-making process. And when we don't, we're walking over them. We're ignoring them. And I'm sick and tired of us walking over Maori and walking over our community without actually a move.
Cut it out.
Gallery, please. You can use your symbols, but not your voices, please. Thank you.
I'm David. I can't hear any more of us. Yeah, Carmen's outside.
As I said, it is about getting our community involved in the decision-making process. We have people out there who believe, oh, we know what the council's going to, what the public are going to say. We know what they're going to say. They're going to say no to Māori wards. How do we know that? We don't. We don't because we haven't asked. You know, so this part of the motion is about rescinding the one in November so we can have an open and transparent communication about it. The next part of the motion, which we'll cover in the next part, if I get the opportunity to, we'll cover over how we can do that. But right now, I want you to really look at the last part of my statement there, the outcomes. And I will stress this. The outcome of this revisit is not to be seen or quoted as discrimination against Māori. For rescinding the motion and taking all information and proposed ward layouts of Whangarei to the public is allowing all the public to be included in an open and transparent manner with no prejudice. This outcome does not mean that council staff need to work on this outcome does mean that the council need to work on proposed ward boundaries, how they will be representing on each role, both Māori and general, and how each person will be voted on, either at large or in the ward. And lastly, the outcome also does not remove council's obligations to consult openly and respectively with the Māori community. I'll leave it there.
Thank you, Councillor Cockerill. I'll open to debate. Councillor Cuthbertson.
I just have a question, whether it's possible to take the item 2 and item 3 together. So if Councillor Cockerill is speaking to the next item, whether that can be done, because the discussion is going to be about the issue rather than the sort of specifics of the resolutions. It's going to be quite difficult to have a debate that is only about that resolution and then about the petition and then about the non-binding poll. So I just wondered if
Thank you for your question. The first item that we must deal with is whether or not the decision from the 3rd of November is rescinded. If that motion fails, there's no necessity to go on to the next motions. So they are separate. And so the first one, in debate, people can speak of the proposal in the second notice of motion, but it's the first item that we are dealing with is whether or not council will rescind the decision from November.
Okay, I just want to ensure that any broader discussion is not ruled out of order because it's not specifically about that resolution verification. So, yeah.
I think the supporting documentation that Councillor Cockerill has included in his motion enables us to discuss those other items. I wouldn't rule those as being not relevant to the decision around rescinding.
Okay.
Hopefully that clarifies.
That's my only question really, but we can have it wider.
Thank you, Councillor Cuthbertson, for the question. Councillor Cooper.
Thank you very much. Good morning, everybody. I'm Ken Cooper. I represent the Whangarei Ward.
Councillor Cooper, I just need you to remind you that this is a council meeting, so you address your debate to the councillors. I understand you don't want to have your back to the members of the public, but if you could direct your debate to the councillors, thank you.
I am councillor for the Whangarei Ward, and I expect to be held accountable for the decisions that I make in this chamber. I'd like to first of all acknowledge the people who have been involved in bringing this debate back to the chamber. Frank?
Maybe you missed your, you're supposed to be talking to us.
Councillor Martin, are you raising a notice of
Motion.
a point of order? Councillor Martin is raising a point of order that you need to address to the councillors. I agree with him.
Quite so. Thank you, Councillor. people who have brought this motion back to the chamber. There's been a lot of work done, and the people who have brought it back, I mentioned Frank Newman, John Lane, Whangarei, have, by their engagement, demonstrated their commitment to this community. And that should be acknowledged. There's been a lot of time and work on, and they're also members of the community who have put countless hours in other areas into the well-being of the community. So I respect that work. I'd also like to acknowledge those members of the particular area community who are in the audience today. Co-Chair, Ian Bristow, and also our Co-Chair, Councillor. I'd like to acknowledge the members of staff, including Abraham and the roles that he has in our council and in our community. I'd also like to acknowledge the community at large who we as elected members serve, whether they be in the gallery today or whether they be watching on live stream. I think it is important that this discussion is here today, now. And the reason I think it's important is that when we made and passed the motion in the first instance, the rules were different. And since then, the rules have changed. And so this decision is too important to be clouded in some sort of mystery or some sort of perhaps perceived sleight of hand. There was a change in the rules that was rushed through, and our rights as members of New Zealand and members of the Whangarei District were removed from us. The right to have a poll that overturned the decision. Now, that doesn't sit well with me. I don't agree with that sort of thing. And so it is good to have the debate again today, knowing full well what our decision means. But of course, it's not the first time in the history of this country that people's rights have been taken away. However, just because it's happened before doesn't make it right. So now we're having a discussion. So I thank Councillor Cockerillo, who is supported by Councillor Reid, Denman, Martin and Hulse to bring this back. I think we should be very clear and not confuse ourselves that a vote in support of Councillor Cockerillo's motion is a vote for business as usual. It's a vote for the status quo. We know this because every poll that has been conducted on our rewards has overturned the decision. So if we rescind this motion today, we are voting for business as usual. And I think we should look at what business as usual has delivered for us. It's delivered a poll signed by roughly 8% of our ward, of our district. And I think it's good to get that number in context. Recently, when John Bain resigned from his position as a regional councillor, there was a by-election. Now, I'm not certain of the figures, but I think it's roughly 25% of those who were eligible to vote voted. 8% signed a petition on a contentious issue. Subsequently, after much publication of that contentious issue, 25% of people voted to vote. 75% of the people, therefore, felt disengaged or disinclined. 32% of our district, I'm told, identify themselves as Maori who are partners in the Treaty of Waitangi. And that treaty is woven into the fabric of our society at just about every level that you can imagine. And to ignore the treaty and to pretend that it doesn't exist is denying reality. 45% of our people vote in the normal local body elections. Only 45%. This is business as usual. If we carry on, that's what we can expect again, 45%. So 55% of people either don't care or are disengaged or disinclined to vote. The model that we operate under has delivered 90% of the wealth of this country to 1% of the people. So, looking for an article in the Herald. 90%. I'm not sure that that's a sustainable course of action for us as a country or as a district. What is 100% sure going to happen, absolutely beyond doubt, is that as a district and as elected members representing our district, we are going to be facing local government reform of the significance of the like we have not seen for some time. And so one raises the question, do we want to go into those reforms with 32% of our population backed up by a treaty which was designed to have both cultures walking forward together for the benefit of both cultures? Do we want to go into those reforms with 32% of those special people not represented? And we are facing challenges. And if you think that climate change and the COVID pandemic are offshore and don't affect us, then think again. Because we make decisions in here, we have made decisions about the money that we spend, and the measures that we put in place, and the things that we do or don't do. They come right back home into this chamber. We have national challenges. Unaffordable housing, employment. Every way you turn, we are facing challenges, and that comes back into this chamber. So, I guess I say to you all, as an elected member, at some point, as elected members, we must say to ourselves, things actually aren't working. We must take responsibility for that. And we must make the changes that we can to try and address the problems that we can identify. I'm not pretending that the introduction of Maori laws will solve all our problems. Not for 1 minute. However, if people like us don't make a statement and at some point make a change, all we will get is the same as we've always had.
Councillor Benny. Oh, I do beg your pardon, Councillor Reid. I didn't indicate Councillor Reid would be next. I apologise. Councillor Reid.
Thank you, Your Worship. Fellow councillors, Whangarei, those watching on live stream. Democracy. For me, that's the right to have your say. And that applies to everyone within this district. Hence the reason I've seconded this motion. to be inclusive, everybody has the right to have a say. Not a percentage or anything. It has got to be out there for everyone to say. Now, a non-binding poll does not mean that we are going to change anything. It just means that we have given everyone in the district fair and equal opportunity to express their opinions. That is how democracy works. Not 14 of us making the decision for all. That, to me, is not really democracy. Emotion has played a huge part in the last few weeks of probably everybody's lives in this group, and probably in the wider community. Emotion clouds judgment. We've seen that come from the highest level in Wellington, and it still keeps coming. I try to distance myself from that and focus on facts and clear opportunities for everyone. That, I feel, is the reason that I was voting to stand here today. I've received a number of emails, both for and against this decision. By and large, all without emotion, simply stating fact and their wishes. Anybody who sends me an email where emotion starts to come in it, name calling, insinuating, I get deleted. Same when I listen to public speaking, when I hear people making misleading statements about a number of anything that may come into the vote. As soon as I realise it's misinformation, it's deleted from my psyche, and I will not use that as part of my judgment. Last year, we decided, following on from the start of the scenario, they will come in time. There is no doubt that is the way it is going to happen. It's when, it's the timing, it's how. And to me, with the amount of emotion that's flowing around our district for and against right now, we need to take a step back, reconsider our thinking. Last year, there was a committee put together to work towards forming Te Karara as a standing committee of council. I was fortunate enough to be on that, and between 3 councillors and Hapu and Iwi representatives, within 6 months, despite COVID-19 lockdown and every other challenge that was thrown at our feet, we managed to achieve that. And at the end of it, we had 8 representatives from Marion and 8 from council. To me, that's 16 voices. We have monthly meetings, and that standing committee is actually taken into the confidence of council. That is a massive step forward. We are well on the way. My warning is, let's not jump off that cliff with a mighty leap of faith and push the boundaries too quickly. Time. Build your structure. Get your foundations done, which is Te Karara. That has a massive standing within council. 16 voices. There's only 14 in council. Right. We're in front. Work on that. Build that strength and make it a force to be reckoned with that cannot be disbanded by a future council or mayor who is not as sympathetic to our cause. So I have pleasure in seconding that amendment and just wish to advise everyone to proceed with caution.
Thank you, Councillor Reid. Councillor Benny.
Morena, Gavin Benny, Denby Ward. Without a doubt, my 3 years on council has been the most frustrating job I have ever had. Bureaucracy has just dragged me in. Every day I come here and I go, what's this? But I realise it's not bureaucracy, it is bureaucrats that drag us down. In 1867, the New Zealand government introduced Maori electors into New Zealand Parliament. That's 1867. In order to give Maori a voice at the table. That's 154 years ago, and here we are now. We've been told now is not the time. Don't jump off the cliff. Take our time. Slow down. 154 years of bureaucracy. That is bureaucracy at its best. So Maori at the bottom of almost every social statistic. Housing, health, employment, jail, gangs, drugs, the list goes on. Why is that? It's because the system is not working for them. We can say, come on you fellas, you've got as much chance as everybody else. But that's been proven time and time again to not be the case. That is not the case. So today, we have the opportunity to reaffirm a decision we have already made. Now this is a point that I want to be clear about. We have made this decision as a council. We have the opportunity to reaffirm that today. This has given us an opportunity to reaffirm or go back to square one and let bureaucracy do its thing. We have the opportunity to make small change to the system and introduce Maori wards. The challenge to those elected into that is huge, and you can guarantee that I and others will hold you to account to make a difference to Maori. I've been really disappointed with this whole debate, how divisive it's been. I've been called corrupt, and I've been threatened, and I have been told a number of times that if I do not support the notice of motion of Councillor Cocorello, then I will not be elected next election. If that's the price of democracy, so be it. I will be voting against the notice of motion.
Councillor Bennett. Councillor Connor.
Kia ora tātou, ko Pariaka te maunga, ko Hatea te awa, ko Kawakawa, ko Hau, ko Kona, ko Whanu, ko Nicholas, toka ingoa. My whānau has been here in Aotearoa, New Zealand for 179 years. Early settlers immigrated to New Zealand on the Bombay in 1842 from England, with the first Conif arriving in 1871. Today I bring with me the mana of my father, my granddad, and my great-granddad, who I've learned have all had a part to play in positive part in Maori affairs in my history, and it is now my turn. Currently, we have a representative democracy. There are different types of democracy, where representatives deliberate and decide rather than direct democracy, where everyone makes decisions. This type of system was not here prior to European settlers arriving, and they brought with them a new governance. Prior to coming onto council, I had discussions, and I had been told to not be a fence sitter and make the decision, regardless of if it's easy or hard. While I did not reply to any of the emails that I received 62 emails this time, which is 100 less than last time, and I appreciate everybody who did send them in. I appreciate their feedback. I only hope that when we get long-term plan submissions, that all of these people will also submit on all the other facets of council. I still question the fact that in 2017 the council felt they could stick with the status quo and not go out to public consultation rather than a no vote is still a vote. I appreciate the manner in which many emails were written, and there are also many that I felt could be quite threatening. If I was scared of losing my position. Some backdoor political bullying as it would. I'm grateful for the chance to be here and represent the whole community and ensure even the minority are heard. There are so many misguided statements that were quoted. We're being dictators, and yet there's 14 views around council. Maori ward seats are in no way being allowed to freeload on the council or to expect a free ticket to become a councillor. Maori wards are the same as Okar and Denbu wards and the other ones, and those running in them will be elected in a legal system that is already in place and they will need to be elected, and anybody can run in that ward. Our wards already do not allow the majority to have their say in the ballot box. However, with Maori wards being introduced, we have the chance to have a representation review, which will allow the greater people to actually be represented more appropriately for what they wish, whether it be at large or changing the ward system. The question I got was, are we not all New Zealanders? And from many discussions and listenings, many Maori do not consider themselves to be Kiwi or New Zealanders. They consider themselves to be Maori, and there are two peoples in Aotearoa, Tangata Whenua and newcomers, which are Pakeha and Tauiwi, which I proudly stand as one of them. While we are all human race, our cultures are individual and should be embraced. Te Ao Maori is the Maori worldview and be quite intangible to many. While it's not a religion, similar aspects to others of intangible beliefs and customs are present. Having Maori wards ensures we have representatives who reflect the culture, history, and understanding of the unique dynamics that Te Ao Maori and the needs of the Maori community, and will be a positive change for local government. Public decision that we make of whenua, land, wai, water, te taiao, the environment, climate change, economic development, and social well-being, which can only lead to enhanced council processes. The mention of the potential loss of Te Kerere in the new term by a strong-willed mayor could happen regardless, and true colours will be shown if it was. One safeguard is to have Maori wards and to ensure that Te Ao Maori view continues. Through Te Kerere, the Hapu supported Maori wards as one of the advisory committees, and I'm taking that advice. I was really grateful that the last meeting was actually live streamed, so I was able to listen in on that discussion. And I tell you, I can't believe I felt so much, but compared to what the others might have been feeling, I have no idea. Mental health is important, and from what I heard from that, there's a lot of mental health that are people being broken. No way is perfect, and Maori wards to be established will either be a huge success or not. Let's all move to the future and leave history where it belongs, as one quote against stated. However, I'll use it in a different term, and let's all move to the future and leave history where it belongs. We must learn from history and adapt.
Councillor Peters.
Kia ora, koutou katoa. I thank Frank Newman and Robin Cruz and John Bain for their work, and I was interested to hear his presentation this morning. I also noted that he said he had noticed that previous councils had decided this was an issue that shouldn't be brought to the table and that we shouldn't have changed. And I voted last time for Māori wards, and having considered the signatories too that have made that have put their time in, and the presentations and all the emails for and against. I also consider Kevin Gross's signatories that he collected and the many emails we received for Māori boards. So this is an issue that is important. But I note that council over the years has not been able to establish Māori boards. At our Te Karerea meeting, Pūpānga spoke about the and. So Te Karerea is a step on the way. It is useful and it's good, and I acknowledge Councillor Lee in saying yes, that is helpful. Māori wards is the next step that we need to take, because we need to have decisions at this table when, as Councillor Cooper says, we make those decisions, important decisions about climate action, about water, about the shape of local democracy, which is set to reduce at the moment. I also note from Terry Burkhart's presentation, this is just another step along the way towards constitutional reform for our country. So it's not the end game. We really need to recognise that Māori are slotting into an English system. They have right from the beginning. When they signed the treaty, they didn't realise that was going to happen, but it did. And they didn't know that they were going to become a minority in their own country, which they have. So these things are, as Councillor Bennett has said, this has resulted in some absolutely terrible outcomes for Māori. They haven't been at the decision-making table. Interestingly, people mention the introduction of national Māori boards. In fact, it was a Pākehā ruse at the time to reduce Māori influence by keeping those numbers to 4. It wasn't a representation of time. So we're actually in our era making steps towards a future that I hope will see our country be a peaceful and discussing place, a place where issues are discussed rather than fought over, so that we can actually have a future that our children, that my children and grandchildren and everyone else's is able to sit around the table and discuss things rather than get heated about it. The Eastern Bay of Plenty actually introduced Māori boards some years ago, and they probably also started out with quite a bit of trepidation. In fact, over the years, they have found that has been an enrichment of their decision-making process. And I believe that that having Māori at the decision-making table in a representational number will add to our ability to address the important decisions that will be necessary over the next little while.
Councillor, is there any further debate? Councillor Murphy.
Well, people often commend me on being diplomatic, but today I'm not going to be diplomatic. I won't be thanking Frank Newman, John Bain or Robin Greaves for the presentation of their petition. I find it extremely contradictory when in the cover letter that they have presented, they call that we are of a firm view that from a constitutional perspective, decisions on changing the electoral system as opposed to ward boundaries should not be made by councillors without recourse to the view of the constituents. However, I find that contradictory when I look to the Hobson's Pledge website and I see the propaganda which can be found, and if people haven't looked in detail at their website, I encourage you to, because as Terry Burkhart said, this notice of motion today is a red herring. It's a red herring. People who have been proponents of the petition for this referendum have been the ones who have said that Māori wards are divisive, Māori wards are separatist, Māori wards are racist. Well, I call that out for what it is. That is just absolute rubbish. On the Hobson's Pledge website, the type of material on there, here's one, a book that you can buy. To all New Zealanders, are we being conned? And the excellent 36-page e-booklet, which details the myths which prop up the treaty industry and lists the many laws granting special treatment for Māori. You can download this on here. You can look at the 24 myths of the treaty industry and why a growing number of New Zealanders are upset with this power and the wealth and power grab by this newly created tribal elite. These are the people that we're dealing with. And I call it out for what it is. Democracy, thank goodness, has evolved over time. When we look back to the first Greek democracy, there wasn't much democratic about that. Only men who owned property could vote. Women couldn't vote. Slaves couldn't vote. Wow, that was really democratic. But thank goodness over time, we have had the suffragette movement. So power to those suffragettes, and the woman got the vote in 1893. And then Maori got the vote. Oh yeah. But yes, so our democratic systems are changing and evolving, and I salute the Honourable Nanaia Mahuta for amending the Act. I salute her because she's improving our democracy. And so I think that's fantastic. Yep, I just wanted to also say, Councillor Peters, exactly, I agree, the and. And no, I think anything that is going to, as Councillor Connick said, we have a representative democracy. By enabling Māori wards, we're going to have representation for our tangi whenua. We are going, it's just positive. I think it's just going to be wonderful. So here's to, what was the word you used? Adapting, improving, embracing. That is truly the way we need to go. Thank you.
Councillor Deeming.
Thank you, Your Worship. This debate is about consultation, or should I say lack of. We consult on all sorts of minor matters, and something of this significance we choose not to. The Local Government Act, excuse me, requires that a local authority make itself aware of and should have regard to the views of all its communities. Council's own significance and engagement policy requires that on every issue requiring a decision, the significance to the community and the requirement to consult must be considered. Clearly, the decision by a majority of 2 to create Maori wards triggers the high level of public interest criteria, which we have seen, as well as many other criteria, including having a major and long-term impact on Council's representation and function. The consultation considered and the referendum is intended not to be binding. It is intended to be a gathering of information from our community so that councillors can actually make an informed and considered decision rather than their own personal view coloured by their own background. The introduction by government of retrospective legislation has denied the community the opportunity to be consulted as determined by the Local Government Act and its right to contribute to a democratic decision. Whatever your view of democracy may be, it is still consultation and a consensus of opinion from the community at large, not a small matter of 8 out of 14. We should have the opportunity to be united by what as a nation we have in common, as Mr. Newman referred to, not divided by our differences. In my view, we'll truly become one nation by building on what we have in common and not being divided by our differences. Thank you.
Councillor Deeming. Councillor Innes.
Thank you, Your Worship. The reception I've been receiving hasn't been the best, so I imagine that it may not be the best in the council chamber from my end. So if that is the case, Rob, can you just raise your hand? Okay. It's good. Okay, fine. Look, I just want to go back and I really want to acknowledge, first of all, Councillor Reid and your statements. I come to this debate with a very open mind. And it's one whereabouts you'll appreciate that I voted against Māori wards in the previous review, and the other motion that we're looking at rescinding, I actually voted for Māori wards. I see it is a two-step process, or what's referred to and. With the Te Karea now a standing committee, it's added substantial benefit, and that has been the fact that we do meet on marae and we meet also in the council chamber. It's a direct link to hapu. And I think in terms of that, it has provided some value even to date. When we actually met with the Minister, Nanaia Mahuta, prior to the Waitangi Day, and we discussed what I consider the threat to local democracy. The threat to local democracy is local government reform that's currently taking place. So I see that representation is key. I see that my experience of chairing the Planning and Development Committee and actually having a representative around that table added a lot of value to me in chairing that meeting, ensuring that I actually got input on those issues that were being discussed. So I see it as a question of fairness, and it's one picking up on Councillor Benny's points in terms of the various statistics that are quite there. They're well known, they're reported on a regular basis. But there is always a searching for solutions. And I really see that it needs to be inclusive. And I see that local government really has to be advocating local democracy in a sense of fairness. With the current local government reform we are facing with three waters, we're starting to see those decisions probably moving further from this council chamber that I'm looking into at the moment, and more at a inter-regional level. So I'm not going to support the motion. I'm also mindful that in 6 years' time, there is the ability to revisit, and that starts in 4 years' time. So what I see is that we just have to look at the effectiveness of it. We're looking at Te Karea and the effectiveness of that. Hopefully that will get over the line again next year with the new council. But also I would hope that with the Māori wards that in 4 years after they've been formed, they will also show that they are effective and fair in terms of representation. Thank you, Your Worship.
Councillor Innes. Councillor, any further debate? Councillor Cutforth.
Thank you, Your Worship. Just want to start by some comments about Nanaia Mahuta removing this sort of democratic right, and just remind people that, well, first of all, when I think Nanaia recognises now that it's actually was an amendment to fix an anomaly that was there from the beginning and should never have been there right from the start. And also just to remind councillors that central government actually has the prerogative, whether it's a privilege or whatever, and does this quite often to local government. And in fact, I can recall the day that I got made redundant from Hokiura City Council, central government suddenly gave councils the role for noise control, with no money, I have to say. And so councils in 1988, I think it was, back in my youth, suddenly had responsibility for noise control. So central government does this quite rightly, I think. That is its power, that is its role, is to make legislative changes. The other thing I just want to address is the significance and engagement issue, because I do agree that that is an important issue. But in 18 months' time, there is going to be the court of public opinion. And I was reminded by a number of rather nasty emails from the Democracy Northland group thing, or like people, that my time would come at that time. I mean, I'm happily publicly to say that I'm not standing again, but equally, I would not be afraid. I would not be afraid of that type of comment. I think you're here, you're put here to represent the people who put you here to the best of your ability, and it is certainly their right to knock you out if they don't like what you're thinking, but I would never, ever make a decision on those grounds. So to me, council is like a jury, you know, if you like. It's a representative group of the range of views within our community, and I think you can see that really, really clearly in this particular council, the diversity. I personally think that council is a better body to make those sort of decisions than polls or referendums. And I think the Whangarei example is the classic example of why a referendum is not, that's my view, is not the ideal way to make decisions. Generally with polls and referendums, you get the people who have or feel they have some sort of strong vested interest. You don't get the general majority, and I think you do get more of that at the election. The fact that we get 45% of people voting, okay, it may not be that high, but that's 1 in 2. And that's a whole lot better, I think, than the numbers that we get in referendums. So I just wrote down here, I think council making these decisions. Council is like the curate's egg, I think is the English term, like it's good in parts, you know, and we try and work with the parts that are good. One of the things, apart from the other vitriol that I got in some of the emails, was comments from people that it was giving Maori a sort of special right. And somebody actually said to me, you know, they don't. Why should they have 2 votes? It's like, well, they're not having 2 votes; they're having 1 vote, just like everybody else. And I think, to me, having changed my view, I have to say, to me, the thing with Māori wards is it guarantees Māori representation at the table. As Frank Newman would say, it gives Māori a hand up, not a hand out. So I just had to do that. Thanks, Frank. And it's part of a step towards, as other councils have mentioned, on either side, I think, towards changes in local government which are coming, and which will bring, I think, a more representative, more representation into local government, whether it's through, in the future, I hope, a change to the voting system, so we have preferential treatment, a change to the ward system, which is now inevitable with Māori wards, that we are going to have to really rethink that. A change to, you know, the possibility of community boards where there will be more local democracy, let alone the changes that are happening at a higher level around waters, and what that will mean for local government, and maybe a responsibility for local government to pick up some more social and economic responsibilities that we haven't had in the past. So to me, it's part of that process. And I think the other thing that I've really noticed, and I noticed it during the election as a Pākehā, I have to say, as a Pākehā, the impact of having Māori electorates and the way in which that ensures that the Māori population can hold their voted representatives to account. And I think you saw that really strongly in the last election, and I'm hoping that that will be the situation here, and it will also encourage more Māori participation in voting, including more Māori, and I've said this to Huhana just last night, more Māori standing in general seats. I really hope it's going to encourage more participation, and I genuinely think it will. So I'm really happy to stick to my decision to change my position from some years ago, and I wish we didn't have to have this debate again, because I think we had a really good debate a couple of months ago about it. Thank you, Commissioner.
Councillors, any further debate? Councillor Holtz?
Thank you, Your Worship, and I want to acknowledge the issues we've got today. This is a subject, I think, we operate under principles and a lot of standing orders at Council, and standing orders actually enable this type of thing to happen, to readdress previous decisions. I just want to start by a quote that I made on 2 months before we set up a standing committee. We've been given a real challenge to deliver a working model that will serve us well and cover off the years of frustration. Just by saying things over and over does not achieve the change we need to make. We need to gain the respect of all other residents that live in our district. New Zealand Government, the Local Government Act, has made it clear that local authorities have to follow Maori participation in decision making, and it's up to us to deliver on that. I just want to recognise the pretty outstanding work that our council and Maori have done over the this present term of council. We've set a challenge. The challenge was to uphold what we had in the Local Government Act. But before I get on to that, I just want to go back to our previous speakers at the opening of this meeting. There is a lot of frustration out there, and the frustration continues to build because you don't get satisfactory answers. We at our level at Council have a divide. Anything to do with the Treaty of Waitangi at the highest level is a government responsibility, not local government. We are delegated authority under the Local Government Act, and we can only make decisions what we take an oath to do. So under the oath, it allows us to have Maori collaboration. It allows us to go through it and make better opportunities for Maori to participate in decision making. That is what we did. Maori and Pākehā, or Maori and Council got together, set up some working parties that worked through all the information we had available to us, worked through, brought it back to Council, had working parties work further on it, and determined a terms of reference. I don't think the community has an understanding as much as we could, as Council, could get out to them. Under the terms of reference, our committee has recommendations to appoint members of that Te Kāinga to other committees.
Point of order.
Councillor Collop, your point of order.
Ken Cooper was brought up for talking to the stand. I feel that Councillor Holtz seems to be approaching the stand as well. I'd appreciate it if you
Councillor
talk
Collop
to...
has raised a point of order, Councillor Holtz, that you address the councillors, and I will read it.
Okay. So if it's Councillor Connor, I'll look straight to you, Councillor Connor. Thank you. So under our council process, we go through, we have working parties, we have workshops, we have various information sessions, and then we lead to a council resolution. During the working party process, there's a lot of issues that we put together to have a game plan to be successful when it came to council. The Hapu representatives wanted a series of participating matters. They want to be involved, they want to make decisions on this. We had ours, we meted it together, put the game plan that was successful in council. We've got a model in our council here in Whangarei that could be the model that New Zealand used nationally. Because we meet on the marae, we have co-chairs, and we include Maori in our decision making. All under current legislation. right from the very first start, and everyone in this room, in the councillors and our Hapu representatives, know right from the start, my main quest as a co-chair of Te Kāre area was to take the people with us. That means the community. So we've made success. And people say, okay, what are you doing? We are doing extremely well at making decisions. We've done extremely well at attracting attention of ministers. We've been up as a group and met with the Minister of Local Government. We've actually addressed her face to face. We're making inroads. I stand up here today as co-chair because I feel the process we're in now is undermining the very process that our council set up. And I take an issue with that. It is if you look around the room and you see the signatories on this motion, 3 of Council Standing Committee chairmen have signed it because of experience and the background and the knowledge to work within the system. The system dictates what we can do. The government has got their responsibility, we've got ours, but we're doing this under the legislation available to us today. I'm not against Maori wards. I'm against having council set up a Te Kāre area committee in partnership with our local community and our Hapu representatives. I've got an issue that this is about undermining the very committee that we set up in September last year. We have not given it a chance to develop to its potential. We have not given it a chance for our Hapu members and Maori to see that we can work together, and we have not given a chance to Hapu members to develop in the council arena to put their name forward for standing council. That would be a great advantage if we did that. So I, as a chair, I like to lead, and I'm not a follower. I tend to lead the committee with a vision at the end. The vision at the end is to make sure we are the best New Zealanders. We've got a model that's enduring, that goes past the election. So it doesn't matter who the mayor is, or it doesn't matter what comes forward. The system we develop now should be strong enough to endure and travel past that election. That is where we'll make the big differences. Last term of council, I was elected the political lead of the Kaipara Working Party. Auckland Council, Northern Regional Council, Kaipara Council, and the Whangarei District Council. Tāmi Turangi, who's on our Te Kāre area meeting, was the co-chair of the Hapu group. We strategised, we held together, we showed unity as a group, combining 4 councils and Hapu members to hold together, show unity, stick to the game plan, and we're successful in getting $100 million from the government for remediation of waters going into the Kaipara Harbour. That is the type of leadership we need. We need to bring the strong unity together. This is separatism at its best. Walk together. We are a true partnership. We will have the success if we do work together. Because people are sick and tired of division. We've got an opportunity to lead this council with our Hapu membership, and all our councils, we're really impressed about how well we're getting contribution from our Hapu members. Very impressed with it. And so we've made, so within not even 1 calendar year, we've gone from here way up to here already. And if we don't have the ambition to get to the very top of New Zealand and set the standard, we are under-delivering for our Hapu members. We're not delivering what Maori wish us to do. So it's a good debate. I'm pleased it's back here. But I feel that my committee that I lead in this council is being undermined big time at the present time. So I want to focus on our committee, deliver what we promise, stick to the game plan, and make sure we've got a voice in Wellington. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Holmes. Councillor Martin.
Yeah, well, 10 years ago, we decided, probably more, we decided to set up Whangarei. We had a group come in, there was about 8 from each side, 7 at that stage, I think, from each side. The whole idea was to upskill everybody in how things were going to operate. But Tiffany was the one who was in the chair. He learned well, I have to say. He's an outstanding advocate for Northland now. And he was here, he was learning, and we were building the whole organisation. And it was great. And several others have gone on too. Another thing about the same time I was involved in setting up was the Whangarei Coastal Community with the Whangarei and the 3 ratepayers groups. And it's magic. Other areas I've been told try to replicate.
Councillor Martin, a reminder to speak to the...
have tried to set up the same thing and been unable to do it, which is a credit to our area. And whatever the vote today, we're all still going to be working together, all of us, no matter what happens. And we will still be helping everyone do stuff. But true democracy is absolutely critical. How can you say you represent the people, but we're too scared to ask them what they want and what their opinions are? I've got great faith in the people. Had we had that vote, we would have ended up with all of the community together and they would have known where we should be going. But we haven't done that, so now there's always going to be that undercurrent of the people who are unhappy. And this is only one issue, there'll be thousands, because as soon as this passes today, which we were told before I came back from Auckland yesterday that it was going to pass, that we're going to have to get together and work out how everything fits together. It's going to be a couple of really different people around the table in a couple of years' time, but everything has to be worked out still, everything. Had we gone out to consultation, we would have been able to ask the people, these are the options, how do you think they should be? How do you think people should be elected? Should it be over the whole area? Should it be on a ward system? Or should it, how are you going to do it, on tribal boundaries or what? How is it going to be? Those are the discussions that we should have had through a consultation process that now we're going to have after the decision has been made, and with who. So that, I'm really concerned about it, and I do think we should have asked the people. We should have consulted properly, and we haven't. We're getting feedback from a minority group of people which is around this table, and a few people that come in here, and I don't think that's a broad enough group that we need to be talking to. So going forward, we're still going to have some kind of a massive consultation round to find out how we're going to put this thing together. So that's why I was happy for it to come back, so that we could have this discussion about how we go about building the project that we're going to do.
Thank you, Councillor Martin. Councillors, I am the final speaker before I offer Councillor Cocorolo his right of reply. I will be addressing the decision on whether or not we are to rescind the decision that we made in November last year. I acknowledge the variety of discussion that has come through on this issue, but I will try and stick to that decision. I sit here as mayor, and I've been looking at the photographs of mayors who preceded me. They go a long way back, and I pay tribute to Joyce Ryan, the first woman mayor, Pamela Peters, the second, and I am the third. The local Electoral Act of 2001, it's 20 years old. It is the act that we make a decision on representation. It allows for council to decide on the establishment of Māori wards. We took that into account when we made the decision in November last year. We also took into account our significance and engagement policy at that meeting. I agree that things have changed since we made our decision. The Local Electoral Act Maori Wards and Maori Constituencies Amendment Bill had policy objectives. Those were to align the treatment of Māori wards and Māori constituencies with the treatment of general wards and general constituencies as much as possible, and to remove all mechanisms for binding polls to be held on whether Māori wards or Māori constituents will be established, and to provide local authorities with an opportunity to make decisions on Māori wards and Māori constituency in light of these changes in time for the 2022 local elections. We had already made our decision that we would be introducing Māori wards in the 2022 and 25 elections. Councillor Cockerillo in his background talks about that if the decision to rescind our motion on Māori wards is passed, that it means that council staff still continue to need to work on proposed ward boundaries. I'd like to correct that. If the Māori wards are not introduced, there is no trigger for a representation review. So we are not required to continue with the representation review if we don't include Māori wards. That doesn't prevent us, of course, from choosing to have a representation review. But, that would be a future decision of council. But I think it's really important to note that under the current regime, the introduction of Māori wards has triggered the representation review. We have already had some briefings on the representation review. I'm actually really excited about that because our community will be surveyed for their thoughts on what community they identify with. That's known as communities of interest. They'll be surveyed on how many councillors in total they would like to see represent them. They'll be asked for their feedback on should we have more wards, how many wards, and should councillors be elected via the ward system or district-wide, which is otherwise known as at-large, or a combination of the above. What about community boards? All of these aspects of representation will be looked at through our representation review. In my knowledge, since 2001, there have probably, I should have counted them, but I don't know exactly, but there were probably about between 4 or 5 times when this council made a decision as to whether or not to introduce Māori wards. Not once did we go to our community to make that decision. Not once did we consult with the community to say, no, we're not going to have Māori wards, or yes, we are. This time, this decision in November was the first time, in my recollection, that we actually did get feedback from Māori themselves through Te Kāriarea. They said yes. We said yes. It is a collective decision of council. One or two of the comments have been said that this is undermining what we have put in place. I'm disappointed to hear that as a thought, because this strengthens what we have put in place. Te Kāriarea is now a committee of council. There is no guarantee that the next council will set up a Kāriarea committee. The committee structures are set up at each triennium. I am proud that for 3 terms we have included Te Kāriarea that was continuing on from former councils who had started Te Kāriarea. I acknowledge them. This council has chosen to set it up as a standing committee. The next council may not. Māori wards are in place unless we rescind that decision. So Māori wards will be in place. Nothing can take that away. It strengthens it. It adds to it. It does not undermine it. I hear the comments that people are saying that collectively we need to be working together forward. This has been a divisive issue. I acknowledge that. I acknowledge the hurt that we've felt by some of the comments that we've got from our community on both sides. I acknowledge that. And I respect you all for the way you have debated this issue today. I respected the way you've listened to all of the opinions with an open mind. I am definitely not going to vote to rescind a decision that we made in December last year. I proudly want to continue on the path of the representation review and look forward. I won't be the mayor next time. I also am not standing, and that's been made known for a very long time. And I wish the next council all the very, very best in their processes at the next triennium. I think that's everything that I wanted to cover, so I will hand to Councillor Cockerill for his right of reply.
Thank you, Worship. Councillors, public, the motion has been put there for us to talk about this discussion, and I know many councillors have made comments that we've already talked about it, we've already been through this. But I reiterate, probably the most important aspect, Te Karea is 8 hapu, not Maori as a whole. 13 councillors and 1 mayor, is not the public or the community. We all have our different groups that we mix with, and yes, we may mix with a vast majority of people. However, we haven't heard their voices. There's been comments made about bullying emails. Look, you should see what I get. I even get threatening emails. Okay? And it's hard when I get threatening emails when I'm still dealing with my dying mother. And I've got to travel to Dargaville every day to see her. So when someone threatens me and then comes in here and threatens again, it is really discouraging. So when we're looking at our community, we have to be well aware that we are dealing with all of our community. We have acts to follow. We have strategic and engagement policies to follow. And when we have hapu and Māori groups who are not recognised by Te Karea, this is concerning. I wanted to see something which was a bit more unified amongst Māoridom. I haven't seen that as of yet. The Mayor talks about no guarantee of TK to continue. TK to continue. There's no guarantee that we'll actually have 1, 2 or 3 Māori representations as well. Because the person who is elected, or the people who are elected by the Māori ward representation may not be Māori. They are there because they've been nominated by someone on the Māori roll. So what we are talking about now is we're talking about policy and process. Not about Māori wards or Te Karea or anything else like that. We're talking about process and policies. And what the government, central government, who changes legislation at a stroke of a pen, who will do that again, and we know they will do that again because they've got it in their plans, and we were told that by Minister Mahuta. So what I'm asking you is to abide by our policies, by the Act, which actually allows all of our community to have a say. Thank you.
Councillor Kokoro. The right of reply has been had. I will put the motion and I will call for a division. Those in favour of the motion to rescind the decision of November 2021, please raise your hand.
Councillors Martin, Reid, Deeming, Pulse and Cockerillo.
Those against?
Councillors Benny, Murphy, Connor, Cutforth, Peters, Cooper, Innes and who?
Yes.
Worship Maria.
The motion is lost. Now, councillors, I misinformed you when I responded to Councillor Cutforth's question. Councillor Cockerillo has rightly put forward another notice of motion, and he does have the right to move that motion unless he decides not to exercise that right. So I will ask Councillor Cockerillo if you're going to exercise your right to put the next part of the motion.
Yes, Your Worship.
So Councillor Cockerillo is moving that the Council note the petition from Democracy Northland and approves the conduct of a non-binding poll on the establishment of Maori wards in conjunction with the 2022 elections. Is there a seconder for that motion? Councillor Demi. Councillor Cockerillo.
Thank you, Your Worship. The next part was actually continue on with what we were talking about, which is about getting our public involved. One of the biggest complaints that we always hear in the election process is we don't have enough people voting. And over the years, this voting number has decreased. Could be by apathy, could be by bullying, could be by any means possible. But the reason is people aren't voting. The philosophy that I had when I brought this motion up was that this would encourage more people to vote and get more people out and actually get involved in our voting system. I still believe it will. Getting our people to actually make a decision on something which is highly, highly important, because it actually brings people together. And the other point of noting the petition of Democracy Northland, we haven't formally done that, and I think that was one thing that we needed to do, since we did note the petition from Kevin Gross. Sorry, not petition, a collective of signatures. So it's only in a formal manner that we do that as well. Because it's important to acknowledge those 5,133 people who have verified signatures who actually want to have a say. The one thing I want to stress to everybody, and I stress it again, we need to have our people coming with us when we make decisions, not against us. Because the more we make divisive approaches or divisive decisions, the harder it is for our public to trust us. We need to bring them along with the decisions. And we need to be there together. I find it hard when someone says to me, I know how the public are going to vote. You know, by the same person who's been bullying me, they turned around and told me, Your Worship, oh, you won't get in. No one's going to vote for you. You know, this is the thing. We are here because the public have voted us in here. Not because of our own ambitions, desires, or will, but because the public have voted us in here. And hence the reason again, I ask that we make a petition and we have it at the election time to allow our public to have a say.
Councillors, just before I open it for debate, Councillor Cockerillo, you didn't include anything in your documentation as to what a cost implication would be for such a move. Do you have that information, or do we have?
I have been informed by the Electoral Office that it would be $9,000.
$9,000? Thank you, councillors. It's just important for us to have all the information. Councillor Connor.
Just a quick question. Regarding the petition that has been brought to us this morning, at what point would that have been noted? Because I do remember that it was ready to be brought to the last meeting, however it was decided by whomever it was that decided to bring it to this meeting instead. whilst we also heard that we would be accepting the petition through RCE. He has said that we will be receiving it and not turning it away. So when is it noted per se, please?
My understanding is that the petition was delivered to council and was then sent on to the electoral officer because that was the correct procedure. In my experience with petitions, and you'll note in the public forum at the last meeting, we had a petition from Jim Kilpatrick, and it's noted in our minutes, our proceedings of the meeting, that the petition was received. So that would be the normal way that we would note receiving a petition. Have I got that correct?
So, if it was ready then, what?
No, when people deliver a petition is entirely up to
Yeah,
to the people.
no. So, with it being delivered this morning, and now has been noted, it's not?
It's been part of the public forum.
So it's at the beginning.
Thank you. Councillor Peters.
Just a question. Might it be helpful to provide one or two of the two parts?
You're asking that it be taken in parts?
Yes.
I would be happy to do that, yes. Any debate? Councillor Connor. Thank you, Councillor Connor. Councillor Benny.
Point 1, yes. Point 2, no.
Any further debate? I will put the motions. Councillor Cockerella, your right of reply?
No, I'm happy with that, Your Worship.
So I will put the firstly one that the council note the petition from Democracy Northland. Those in favour say aye.
Aye.
Against?
No.
Against? And Councillor Murphy, you'd like your vote against to be recorded? It is carried. Item 2, that the council approves the conduct of a non-binding poll on the establishment of Māori wards in conjunction with the 2022 elections. Councillor Cockerillo has asked for a division. Those in favour, please raise your hand.
Councillors Martin, Reid, Deeming, Pulse and Cockerillo.
Those against?
Councillors Benny, Murphy, Connop, Cutforth, Peters, Cooper, Innes and Her Worship the Mayor.
That is lost. Thank you, councillors. We'll move to item 7.2. I'll just take a little time for our, actually, 2 hours, you're right, absolutely right, Councillor Cooper. Councillors, we have been sitting for a little over 2 hours, so I would like to adjourn until 11:20. Te kapi whitu, I honour you. Thank you. 11:20. So councillors, can we adjourn till 11:20, please?
I might leave the meeting to go to a keynote address.
So you're an apology from here? You're an apology from here?
Yes. Yep.
Thank you. Thank you.
Yeah, so his job as a project manager at Fonterra. So Councillor Cocarillo, I would imagine, is being interviewed by media. Councillors, we have an apology from Councillor Innes for the remainder of our meeting. Can we have a mover for... Councillor Reid is moving. Councillor... what's your name? Peters.
I'd like to move Councillor Innes back.
I'll put that motion. Those in favour, aye. Against, carried. Brings us to item 7.2, the riveting Treasury risk management policy, including the liability management policy and investment policy review. Now, Alan is the author to this. I will take this item as having been read by the councillors, and I'm sure there will be very good and informed decision-making and testing by our elected members. But there are recommendations on page 28 that the Council, 1, approves amendments to the Treasury Risk Management Policy, which includes the liability management policy and the investment policy. Do I have a mover for those recommendations? Councillor Reid is moving and Councillor Cooper is seconding. Alan, did you want to just give us a bit of background to this first?
Thank you, Worship. This is a fairly consistent policy across the sector. PwC advisors on Treasury matters to around half the council in New Zealand. They all have a very similar approach. Simply because it ties into the lending environment for the sector, by legislation, by what LGFA runs for lending, and also how Standard & Poor's and Fitch and Moody's rate councils. So it's all consistent with the methodology around that. So the changes to this policy really reflect the changes made by both S&P and LGFA over the last while. But more importantly, there's been fundamental and systemic changes to the global economic environment post-COVID. We're going to see a period of sustained interest rates, so we are going to increase a little bit in 12 months' time, I believe. That's a little bit, that's not a little bit, it's for a very long time. So if there's one thing to take away from this policy, it's on page 63 of the agenda. Page 63. Where we're changing the limits on how much of the total debt we can fix at any point in time. We have minimum and maximum bands. What is showing before and after, you'll see a step change in that red line. That's showing the minimum that we can have fixed over that period through to 2026. It's we should be prudent. We should have more on fixed rates going forward as a minimum than we have in the past. Now, our current is still well within that band. What it's saying is take advantage of these rates for this period of time and make sure you fix all that period. That's the biggest change really in this policy, apart from a few tweaks, dealing with things like staff changes coming through there, making it clear how we will charge interest if we want lending to, say, a acute entity or a CCO. Also allows for direct lending to CCOs by the GFA if council approves that lending. So it ties up the policy around those things. Now beyond that, there are no fundamental change to policy.
Alan, I just have a question. Yesterday at our risk and audit meeting, we had a very similar profile where it showed that through our long-term plan we would breach, I think it was about in 2026 or something, breach our own policy limits. So obviously that things will change in the ensuing period, but that is the same application of this information into... Okay, thank you. Councillor Peters?
Sorry, it's not related to passing this, but a question about interest rates. If interest rates rise in the general population, do our interest rates, are they affected? The ones we can get from our bank?
There are, through the chair, there are different drivers to residential mortgage rates and there are to interest rates that we pay. We're driven by basically not by the US Treasury or Federal Reserve policies, flows through to stock rates right across the world. And the policy around all central banks around quantitative easing, which we're basically buying bonds to stimulate economies. As long as that's going on, that's going to suppress interest rates by design. whereas the residential rate comes from partly by that, but also by rules and staff going through the countries and local conditions around supply and demand. So, but regardless of that, through our hedging policies, which this policy allows, we can take positions for a lot longer period than a homeowner can leave. If it's a homeowner for maximum 7 years, we can have a 10-year swap starting in 10 years' time. So effectively, with this rate 20 years out, which we do for a tiny portion of our debt.
What's this note passing down? Councillor Cooper doesn't have that. Any further discussion on the policy review? That's a big sigh. I will put the motion. Those in favour, aye.
Aye.
Against? Carried. Item 7.3, Oruku Landing due diligence, page 66 of the agenda. There are recommendations.
Declare an interest from Councillor Martin.
Councillor Benny.
It's been on the working party, I'm not sure, I can't remember, policy group.
If you're on it, you
So
should review
I'll
it.
just yeah.
Yes.
We're just a working party, so we don't need to declare.
Well, I think it's valid to declare the interest, but there is no conflict. Yeah, it's appropriate to do that. So councillors Benny, Martin and Kokorulo are the council-appointed members onto the informal working party, and they're declaring their interest in that regard. So there are recommendations on page 66. There are three. That the council, 1, approves the allocation of up to $150,000 operating expenditure as overspend in the current financial year for professional services and due diligence on the Oruku Landing Group of projects included within the long-term plan. 2, that the council notes that should council agree to the proposal in the draft long-term plan, the funds will come from the 2021-22 Oruku budget. And 3, that the council notes that if council does not approve the proposal in the draft long-term plan, the money will be written off. Do I have a mover for those recommendations? Councillor Deeming is moving, Councillor Martin is seconding. Councillor Deeming.
Thank you. It seems to me that in the interests of prudence, we have very little option apart from to approve this recommendation. Our other option is to abandon the project now. And I can't see that happening at this point. I just do want it noted that because I have moved this motion does in no way indicate how I may vote later in the past. But I think in view of the fact that we've got to get some fundamental issues sorted out with that project, we don't have any option but to invest in doing something.
Councillor Kokorulo.
Yeah, through you, Madam Chair, question for the Mr. Weston. The approves the allocation of up to 150 OPEX. Does he believe that all of that will be used or only a small fraction of that?
It's a good question. At this point in time, I can't honestly answer that question. It depends on what we find in terms of working through the information and also how much information council would like to start working through. So we'll try to pick a number that we can work with them. As to how much at this point, it's difficult to say.
Through you, Madam Chair, the staff are working very closely with the developer, so surely they would have had all of this information for them already. Or most of the information, have they not?
Starting to work through that now.
Okay. That's what you're working through, so that's fine, that's okay.
Councillor Cutforth and Councillor Martin.
So, if we approve this and we do the assessments, when will that information be reported back to us, given our long-term plan time?
I intend to try and bring as much information forward as we can before deliberations so that you've got all that information to hand. Given the very short time frame to get all of this work done, we won't have everything. We'll try and get as much as we can. So what you've got.
some information to make decisions. I guess there's a second component to this, and it's the IRG CIP, the deadline 30 September, and I think that the work that we do now not only is going to inform council through their deliberations, but it's also going to help us get through that process should that continue on to having to meet the requirements.
Just a follow-up question if I may. So if we're going to be contracting external specialists, have we got, how will we be doing that in terms of timeframes, I guess, and are there appropriate, will we be shoulder tapping some possibilities, or do we know, have we got confidence that there are people, companies around who can do that sort of work in a reasonably time constrained way?
Thanks for the question.
Yes, I've spoken to a large consultancy and asked if they could provide me with a proposal, and then I should talk to the working group and potentially council and saying, given the short time frame, this is what they can provide. I won't be able to go through a fully fledged open tender process for this unused work because we don't have time to do it.
Just another question from me. Can we be assured that whoever's contractor, this is one of the difficulties, I think, will not have any prior involvement, or how do we ensure that it's a clean tender, I guess, given the nature of the project and if we're looking at local or national tender contractors? Am I being clear?
Yes.
You are, yes. At this point, I'm not aware that they've been involved in this project, and I would certainly require them to declare any of that within their proposal.
So can I just, final question, so from what Simon's saying, I'm taking that we have a company in mind, we're not looking at 2 or 3 companies and making a decision, we actually have a company in mind?
I've tried to find a company that's able to provide all the different elements. It's got a broad range of skills to be able to do that. Otherwise, things might slip through the net in terms of a good evaluation. So that's how I'm approach.
Councillor Benny, then Councillor Martin.
I just wanted to give an undertaking that as part of the working group, any significant decisions or points reached, I'll communicate to all councillors at the time. So I'm just giving that undertaking now.
Thank you, Councillor Benny. Councillor Martin.
Yes, it's really important that we do the groundwork properly. We need to make sure that we're getting the best advice so that everybody knows what's going on. The scope of what we need the consultant to do, or various things, we're going to need to decide on that really quickly. We're going to meet fortnightly so that we can cover everything on. So we've got a short time frame, so we're going to have to really get stuck in and do the job and make sure we're getting the right advice and timely. I urge everyone to support this so that we can get it done properly. Nothing better than doing the job properly up front.
Councillor Martin. And Councillor Cutler, will you speak to the motion?
No, I just have another question. Will the scope of the tender include any information around the cost of the proposed building? Or is this solely on the...
My understanding is that the QS is part of that, is that correct?
We are going to ask for advice on that, the cost of the building. The design as it stands at the moment is a preliminary design kind of level, so it makes it very hard to be able to provide this advice around that. But that's one of the questions that we've got. Does this look reasonable, this amount?
Councillor Connor.
With regards, there's a question. On page 68, it goes to kind of the anticipated that external specialist support would relate to matters such as potential geotechnical difficulties. If there were any major technical difficulties with that particular location, what would the future of your development, what would happen if a major
cost increase due to structural, as we think, in other areas, or what would happen if it was not suitable and if the long-term plan has supported it per se as well?
I think the site at this point in time looks like it's one of the less taxing sites in terms of foundation finals. If we did find that things are not as we assume at this point in time, it'll be a case of additional pile lengths or additional piles being put in. Basically, it would just mean foundation is costing more, and that would be for one project. And those are often in the project.
I guess part of that is testing the feasibility study, because I'm sure that they would have addressed that hopefully in their feasibility of the site. My other thought is that if the geotechnical investigations show that investment below ground is more than, it skews the total project, we would have to come back and make that a trigger point of opting out of the project and have further discussion. So it would be imprudent of it, in Shelley's words, to proceed with a project that didn't have cost-benefit analysis. Councillor Dean.
I have a question, thank you, and I think this is pretty much what Tricia was asking as well around the QS. I think we had estimated figures further back somewhere of what the cost of the building might be. I think that came through Griffiths. But it's pretty clear all around that cost increases are rising exponentially at the moment if you can actually get hold of the materials. So even if we can't get an actual cost on the building accurately, I'd like to at least see the difference between what was assessed then and what it would be now. Because as I recall, one of the things that we were talking about was taking on any cost overruns. And that, if the cost increases keep going like they're looking like going at the moment, that is going to be a very big ask. So thank you so much. Leave that in your hands.
Councillor Dean. Councillor Murphy.
Thank you. Simon, I was just wondering, will it include an assessment of the infrastructure surrounding the project that will be associated with or impacted on, e.g. the stormwater, wastewater, seawall that Shelley Walton referred to?
Through Madam Chair, look, I actually I have no problem with this process because it's a very small amount of money, which even though it sounds like a lot of money, it's a very small amount of money when you look at the whole project. And I think the mere fact that the staff are actually working with the original developer and designer, going to that nth degree to make sure that they are correct, and he's given us reassurance that if he will try and keep the budget to as low as possible, I think that is the most prudent thing to do.
Yeah, Your Worship, I'm going to support the motion, obviously, to make staff make sure the council is protected, especially if it goes through the long-term plan bills. But however, the proponents of the scheme have actually just about done all this work for us. Remember way back when we first engaged with them, they acquired a provincial growth fund grant to go through a feasibility study. So all this work should be pretty easy to get together, but that work has already been done. And it just shows probably the lack of trust we've got in our working party members to actually report back to us accurately without having to spend this type of money. Like the point of having people on working party is to actually give feedback to council if we've got a problem or not. So I'm going to support it, but I want this work done because I don't want to hold up any process through the long-term plan.
Thank you, Councillor Holmes. Councillor Cutforth.
So just another question really. So the work that has been done in terms of the feasibility study, will the external, I'm assuming the external consultant will be effectively peer reviewing that, taking that into account. Would that be correct? So I mean, they're going to look at the work that's been done.
Simon, is that what
Sorry. The exact scope I'll work through working. I wasn't going to go and look at the feasibility in terms of numbers. This is facility, use of the facility, the operation costs, more around the build, kind of focusing on this point. So if you're referring to feasibility around build costs, that's what we'll concentrate on. Not the net elements.
No, sorry. No, I'm meaning that the build costs have been estimated in the feasibility study. I guess is the information that has been currently used to put this project together in terms of the building, the site, and all of that information, is that going to be available to the external consultant from the old, current project managers? Or is it intellectual property companies?
Yep, in confidentiality intellectual property. Good question. Do we know the answer?
I hope that will be the case.
That's not a definite yes at this point. Councillor Peters?
Will the feasibility study look at the viability of the whole project now that the hotel may be melted?
That is an interesting element I'd like to talk to the working group about.
But it would be fair to say, Simon, that that's not within the scope that we're doing at the moment. This is more investigation into the land, geotech, QS, resource consent, project management. Because I do agree there does need to be some scrutiny on that, but my understanding is that that's not part of this package of work. Am I correct? Okay.
So, sorry, through you, Madam Chair, just want to clarify that the government money is not dependent on the hotel. The requirement for a hotel, I think, is an NRC requirement, not a government.
And we're looking at the entertainment centre portion of it. Any further discussion? Councillors, the two options we have today are do nothing, so defer the investment into checking out this, I think, on balance, important aspects to the project should it proceed. I question whether or not the fact that we are at the end of March, whether we can spend $150,000. I know that Simon's very capable of spending money quickly. It is a large amount. I fear that we're already in a tight space for our OPEX already. We need to remember that we are making a collective decision to push us even further to the risk of an unbalanced budget. I'll leave it at that. Any further debate? Who moved that? I will put the motion. Those in favour, aye. Aye. Against? Carried. Item 7.4, Durham Road property sale. Page 70 of our agenda, and Jeff Ryan is coming forward.
I have a question before we put this motion. Isn't this supposed to be under confidential type of stuff? All property sales?
So through you, Madam Chair, I'm just recalling, if it's commercially sensitive, then we might put it under confidential, but this is effectively a boundary adjustment, so there's no problem with that. We're not going to result in no changes.
Councillor Cooper is moving the recommendations on page 70. I'll second. Councillor Deming is seconding. I'll just speak the recommendations out loud for those people who are coming in via live stream. The recommendations are that the Council 1 declares the balance of closed road at Durham Road, Waipu to be surplus. 2, authorises staff to offer the property for sale to the adjoining landowner. And 3, authorises the Chief Executive to enter into the necessary agreements on behalf of Council to complete the property sale. So it's been moved and seconded. Councillor Cooper.
Thank you very much. This road is in the territory that very few people get to go to unless you're a forestry person. It seems to make sense to me, having looked at the maps and read the agenda. I and the fact that I think Jeff and his team have kept a 20-metre strip for access to the back title anyway covers off any issues about entry to the back title. So I think it's a mechanical thing that we should support as council. We've done a good job.
Councillor Cooper. Councillor Murphy.
Thank you. Just a couple of questions. When you look on the maps, it looks like it runs all the way through to Finlayson and Brook Road. And so it's a paper road, but it does connect all the way through.
Yeah, so just a little bit of clarification. So we're not closing the road. The road at that point is about 80 metres wide. We're reducing it down to 20 metres, so there will still be a 20-metre paper road strip right through, connecting up to whatever it connects up to. We're just reducing the width. And the whole area is within the planted forest. The planted forest side by side, so the issue came up when the owners of the two forests surveyed their boundaries to determine who owned which part of the trees, who owned the tree. So they found that out, and then now trying to clean up the legalisation. The first step of the process was the forestry right, was they were trying to confirm the ownership of the trees planted on our paper road. And now that we've done that, they're now looking at where the council will sell that. I think the other point to make is that we can only sell it to the adjoining owner or not. We can't create a separate title, we can't sell it to somebody else. The process doesn't allow council to use this road stopping process as to create separate titles, so it causes subdivision. So the choice for council is relatively simple. We sell it to the neighbour or we don't.
Okay. Thanks, Jeff. So, because just to follow on from that, some people do contact me just concerned about whether, for example, in the future, people, cyclists or whatever, still be able to get through. So, and Councillor Martin knows paper roads can be really important to communities as far as just in cases of emergencies or whatever. So people will still be able to use that 20 metres.
So dodging the trees. Still remains a paper road, so still provides legal access potentially other than from the trees.
And an emergency would be quite exciting.
No, that's good. I'm satisfied with that.
Thank you, Councillor Murphy, for the questions. Any further debate? I'll put the motion. Those in favour, aye. Aye. Against? Carried. Thank you. Item 7.5, Management of Public Trees Policy, the adoption. There's a recommendation on page 98 that the Council adopts the Management of Public Trees Policy. We have a mover for the recommendation. Councillor Connick has moved. I'm happy to second that. Councillor Connick.
With the regard to this policy, it's good to be able to be a lot more clear on what can happen within the public space, taking into account as well that these are public trees and not larger areas, significant natural areas. It's good to have the additional information added to it, and I have noted a few from the changes that have been. A few of the other councillors have pointed out that may confuse and say, why haven't we got this? But also it is definitely great to have the benefits of street trees within there, the diagram to kind of show that we are thinking more about the wider area than it is just the tree. I'm happy to support this one.
Thank you, Councillor Connick. Any further debate? Councillor Martin.
Yeah, just on page 107, trees interfering with the network of utility, undermining a structure, at 4.1 and 4.2. It's alluded to again in number 6. But the main one is in number 8. The council has a responsibility of ensuring all trees are planted and maintained in a way that potential harm to infrastructure. That paragraph there is absolutely critical, because one thing that's happening widely around our district is we're having a lot of road collapses on the left-hand side of the road where trees are planted too close. And now people are planting willow trees and poplar trees and stuff, which we plant on the farm to take the water out of the paddocks, and they planted them close to the road or just inside the boundary, and then it's making the road collapse, which is a safety issue, and it's something that we're going to need to really take an issue with. I've spoken to Jeff and Calvin about it, but it's something that is still happening. They're still planting the poplars to suck the water out, which means the road's going to collapse then. So I'm really happy to see that in there, but we just need to, I just wanted to raise that profile because these are people are complaining.
Councillor Martin. Councillor Cutforth.
Just a question, excuse my ignorance after my third term, but when do we go out to the public for comment on development of council policy? And is that a stupid question? Sorry.
I was following other detail.
No, this is council policy. It's different.
We
don't. I just wondered with this, and particularly because of the public interest in trees and council and public trees and all that, whether it is something that we had considered, should consider, do consider.
Councillor Cutforth, my understanding is there are some policies that are legislatively driven, and there would be a consultation process followed for that. This is an internal council policy and doesn't have any requirement for public consultation. I hope I'm correct in this, sir. And this is a policy that has been in place for 30 odd years, and it's been reviewed since. So I think we did have briefings on it, which of course are public, encouraged, but not necessarily going out for feedback on an internal policy.
Okay, and I'm sorry to raise it at this point, I've not raised it at the workshops, because I didn't think of it, I only thought about it last night, actually, that's the agenda, and thinking, because it's been 30 years, it has been quite a while, and because of the interest at the moment in the tree issue, so given that we're not going out, is there some way that we can, in terms of our comms, just let people know about the changes to the policy and that it's been renewed and reviewed and things like that?
Thank you for that. With the assurance that will occur. Councillor Murphy.
Thank you. Yeah, so I mean, this is a good policy, but I think what Councillor Cutforth is referring to, and I brought up some of these issues when we did have our briefings. So, for example, in Auckland, they have the urban ngāhere strategy. So our policy is kind of operational. It's an operational guide, isn't it?
Yes, if I could just add through the chair, remember this is a result of the review of the district planning chapter as well, that was fully consulted on with the public and a lot of feedback. Because of setting that high level policy, we had to change this internal policy. So it has effectively been consulted on with the public in terms of we have public trees and this is what they're defined as, and these are the, if you want to do any work on them, this is what you can do, this is what you can't do. If you want to do something outside of the permitted rules, you need a resource consent, so that side of it was fully consulted on. Some of the other more operational sides of it are internal, such as you need council permission to plant a tree within the legal road, and that covers in the rural roads. We can say, no, you can't plant your poplars there. So some of them, those sorts of issues possibly haven't fully been consulted on, but that would just be council's, how it would manage its assets on a day-to-day basis.
Sorry, I only just started to say what I was going to say, so that's good, that kind of answers Councillor Cutforth's question. I guess what I'm saying is a step further there, and possibly this is something that as governors we need to discuss further, and that would be about looking to a strategy. For example, we've asked the questions in Auckland, they have a goal to increase their canopy cover to 30%, cover the city by 30%, and that's because trees are so important for the health and well-being of communities, not just the environment. There are other things that they look at too, so they look at their district and they look at where there there's a higher percentage of tree cover, and in some neighbourhoods have a much lower percentage, and so that's part of their strategy. What the other thing I was going to say is perhaps it is time that we do look at developing a strategy, and that's because with our climate change obligations, trees are such an important carbon sink. And I've asked up a couple of times if we, and I know it's a really tricky question, if we actually do keep a register or a record of how many trees we plant every year, because I know we do plant many trees.
It varies through the chair, varies year to year, and I don't have last year's figure. Last year was a bit of a funny year for us with the COVID lockdown and everything. We couldn't have community planting days, and we did things slightly differently. So I don't easily have last year's, but I know that the street trees that we're going to plant next month is 700 trees, and that doesn't count the community planting days that are planned. So, but I also understand through the chair that in our climate, in our recent policy we adapted on climate change and sustainability, there is a measure in there around trees for the wider district, not the trees that the Parks Department manage. So it's a bigger measure of the district. So it is in a strategy.
That's good. I have one other question. I can't remember. Thank you. It's good.
Councillor Murphy, Councillor Peters.
Just looking at the, I'm sorry, I agree with the policy, but I wanted to ask a question about the phoenix plant, which is both a pest species and it's actually quite dangerous. When the fronds fall off, they become instruments of war for young people. So I'm just wondering if we're considering removing those trees. And what will be the process?
Through the chair, we will consider removing them, but sometimes are quite iconic, such as the Kensington Park ones. We're unlikely to remove those in the short term, but we do not encourage the planting of them, and then we have a one-off one for removing those.
Do you have a practice of looking at the fallen fronds from that on a routine basis, on the basis that you may be pushed into it by identification?
Through the chair, the tree maintenance contract has a schedule of maintenance that has to be done on those trees to lift them up, take the leaves that are most likely to fall off. So that happens regularly with all of our partners.
Thank you.
Councillor Cockburn.
Through Madam Chair, when it comes to the trees that are being planted, some of these trees are being planted by the community. Will the staff be monitoring where these trees are being planted and actively making sure that they're not planted in the wrong locations?
Through the chair, if we're aware of a recent tree planting, we'll take some action. If we're not aware of it, yes, unfortunately a tree can end up in the wrong place. But if you see any that you think we're all the eyes and ears for our department, so if you could see any and you just let us know about it. But yes, we'll do our best to make sure that privately ones are given consent and are in the correct position.
Through you, Madam Chair, I have previously given many indications of where trees are being planted which have been causing damage to our stormwater and our roading, and yet I still haven't get a response from the staff to say they're not going to do anything about it. So why is that different?
Through the chair, I thought you meant a recent planting. If there was a recent planting that's in the wrong place, we would quickly get on to that. If it's historical plantings of mature trees, this policy is here to help us manage those.
Thank you. Councillor Hobbs.
Yeah, Your Worship, just a couple of points. It's more in a practical sense. On page 107, it's got number 8 at the bottom of the page, the council will manage the impact of leaf fall of deciduous trees. You know, I've been living in the northeast of town for a while, and outside the Whangarei primary school there's a mass of oak tree leaves on the footpath continually for 3 months at a time. It's all the time, it's never swept. And yet we've got it here to be managed by the roading maintenance contract. Well, it's not. And so we're just repeating the same process. Part of the mitigation for water quality is to get rid of these leaves. So council's going to have to focus on how you're going to do it. We're about a year away from focusing on the Treaty of Waitangi claims on Whangarei Harbour. First thing is water quality, and I just explained to you all before in the previous agenda item that if you want to try and to improve the water quality, everything has to be looked at. And so this one here is certainly not being managed at the moment. And to show you how bad it is, every morning the groundsman, the Whangarei Primary School, gets this blower out and it goes all over all of the hard-full areas and blows all the leaves back towards the road. And you go back at 3 o'clock in the afternoon and do exactly the same game. But no one picks them up. So that's a fundamental off. I'd like to see some answers coming back to that. And I've got plenty of photos on my phone to show you if you don't believe it. And the other one is on page 112. It's got the tree removal. Well, under this policy, you never remove a tree because trees over 2 metres of height, and they have got to have a diameter of that much. Now, what 2-yard tree is going to have a diameter of that much? 600 metres. Absolutely theoretically impossible, but it's in our policy. So I think that should have been circumference, not diameter. But that's, so what tree grows to that thing in 2 years? Less than 2 metres.
Through the chair, the requirement for removing trees is set in the district plan. This policy aligns with that. It says we need to get a resource consent. It doesn't say you can't remove them. It just says you cannot remove without getting a resource consent. So that is what the Parks Department do, and it's quite costly. And if we do not follow that process, we're most likely to have issues with their own compliance team.
Your Worship, I'm trying to define whether anyone knows of a tree that's trees over 2 metres height. The thickness.
Councillor Holmes, that section is about recompense for payment values, and that's the assessment. So they're either a tree 2 metres in height or more than, or a diameter of 600 millimetres. So it's quite clear that's 600.
I can recall exactly how it got put in the plan, but Councillor Christie got up there and he had a tape around his thigh and saying, this is the size of the tree.
Councillor Holmes, that was the policy for protection of coastal Pohutakawa, if I recall correctly. Nothing to do with years ago. Councillor Cooper.
Your Worship, I'm not really interested in the measurement of Councillor Christie's thigh. But there is a mechanism, I believe, for moving things forward. It's some sort of motion. If you would remind me what it is, I'll put it and hopefully it'll be seconded.
Councillor Cooper, you may have a closing motion which goes along the lines that you move that the motion be put.
I would like to have a closing motion and move that this motion be put.
Do I have a seconder for that motion?
Oh.
Councillor Peter. You've spoken, Councillor Peter.
Oh. I'll move it. Second
No,
it.
it's been moved.
I'll second it.
You've spoken.
No, I've only asked questions.
We'll keep it clean, and Councillor Reid is seconding. I will put the motion that the motion be put. Those in favour, aye.
Aye.
Against?
No, against.
Can we do that again? Those in favour, aye.
Aye.
Against?
No.
The motion is carried. I will now put the motion. Those in favour, aye.
Aye.
Against? Carried. Item 7.6, temporary road closure, Northland Car Club events, April to July 2021. We don't have the picture. Councillor Pocarillo would like to be moving, and Councillor Holmes is seconding. And the recommendations are to approve temporary closures on Simon Kepper Roads, Hillport Road, Waiotera, Coxhead Road, Parakau, Springfield Road, and these are from the dates. There's a very good question. It's not been part of the resolution. We need to. Oh, they are. They're all there. Sunday the 11th, Sunday the 2nd, Sunday the 20th, Sunday the 4th of July for between 9:30 and 5:30. I apologise. Yes, I'm not reading properly. So it's been moved and seconded. Councillor Cockerello.
Your Worship, look, I just would like to say again, and I'm well aware that Councillor Cooper, I'm stepping on someone's toes, and Councillor Deeming's toes by being in the award. But it's nice to have a previous councillor of the Green Bay Ward support me on this and show how important it is actually to get these types of events happening in our area in New Zealand and actually Whangarei. The Northland Club does an amazing job at trying to run events like this, and it's great to have them actually.
Councillor Cockerello. Councillor Deeming.
I don't know whether I'm speaking for Councillor Cooper as well, but I support the recommendation. I'm very happy to have my toes stepped on in this instance, and I would also be very happy to refer any complaints to the movement secretary.
You do speak to me, Councillor. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Deeming. Any further discussion?
No.
I'll put the motion. Those in favour, aye.
Aye.
Against? Carried. Item 7.7 was withdrawn from the agenda today, so we move to item 8.1, financial report for the 8 months ending 28th of February 2021, page 174 of the agenda, and the recommendation is that the Council notes the operating results for the 8 months ending 28th February 2021. Do I have a mover for that recommendation? Thank you, Councillor Murphy. And a seconder? Councillor Reid. Councillor Murphy.
Oh, I think it's pretty self-explanatory. I don't think there's anything I have to add right now. Councillors may like to go through the information.
Any debate on this information to be received? It's a very important part of Council's business, of course, and oversight of the financial report. Councillor Hobbs.
Seeing we're 8 months into the year, well, this report's for 8 months, could we have, please, for one of our next reports, exactly how much outside money we've had to Provincial Growth Fund, all the other funds, the Tourism Fund, because that has a direct line on our budgets, but we need to know exactly how much comes in. Like we've got an notice on page 175 about development contribution, subsidies, grants and revenue, but it's not broken down how much we're getting from the other departments, other government departments. Because that's essential us going forward, because there's been a huge input of cash into the system.
There's also information included on page 182, Councillor Holt's, the NB Te Tautoko agreement, is noted there those grants that were paid and received and paid up. So,
The biggest problem we've got here, we know about it, but no one else knows. They don't know how much influence the government has been overarching council. We never had this type of funding before. It's only just come in for the last 3 years. This type of money, this cash fund. We've never had it in the past. So our ratepayers wouldn't understand it. If we've got a government that's dishing this sort of money out, we should be in after it as quick as we can. But it's never been explained to the wider community. And if you go through our long-term plan consultation, I don't think there's been a question about the finance of where we get the money. But it's having a big effect on our budget plans.
Councillor Holtz, I would argue that this is very transparent in our reporting of these funds, given the information contained in pages 174 and 175, which detail the funds and the source of them.
Worship, we are reporting it right, but this is the point. How many people down in the wider community can read this page on 172 or 182?
Councillor Holtz, as an elected representative, I would imagine that you disseminate that information if it's requested. It's very transparently reported.
That's why I asked.
Just a question on the monthly activity summary. Just looking at stormwater, unfavourable over 5% of budget. And I'm just wondering, and I know that we've probably been through this in our infrastructure meetings a few times, but could you just remind me, so we put in a last long-term plan, we put a whole lot of additional budget into stormwater. So I'm just wondering, I think there's been a bit of a pattern there that we are overspending in stormwater.
The July event may well have an impact.
Yeah, well, I'm just wondering, is it related to that, or what? Could you just give me...
Through the each one is a CapEx, where this is OpEx reporting. So it is $300,000 over budget at this point in time. That will have wound back to 100,000 by year based on the forecast, to the trial rate function side. The July events will have influence that.
Yeah. So we've got, I'm just thinking ahead, any dialogue you can give us, look into our next long-term plan.
So, our Chief Executive is wanting to have some input.
Oh, yeah, so through you, Madam Chair, so we don't budget for storms and unusual things, floods and things like that. So in the event that we do get storm damage, as we did get a massive hit on the 17th of July, that affects our budget and we overspend. We spend more money doing the repairs and doing the follow-up work. So that's why you'll see it. So every time we do get a major event, you will see that particular issue overspend. In this case, we were lucky enough to also receive some revenue from the Crown, if I recall, to offset that. So we're spending more, but some of that's been offset by government funds as well. So it's a direct result of the 17th of July 2020.
Yeah, that's right. Shouldn't the funding that we got from government have offset all of the cost?
No, they didn't pay for everything. They did a nice job, but not for everything.
All right, thank you.
Thanks, Councillor Murphy. Councillor Cutforth.
Interested that Councillor Holmes is wanting all this to be transparent. I mean, it's really good to see that we can get government funding and show the community how much funding we get from government. It's a good thing. Just like with NZTA subsidies. I had a question about MB funding for White Northland, and I just wondered why that was coming through council.
Through the chair, we are the conduit for funding for all of Northland. So they chose to fund through Tito Topua, and indeed the WDC will be the party who will send those funds to the other interested parties. So it all flows through us.
But the funding is for White Northland.
Indeed. Yep. So,
So
they allocate some money to White Northland, but pay that to us to unpay to them.
Why would they do that for that project and not for other projects?
Because they for all their funding rate, that funding round, they pulled, they chose to pull it, and only basically make us do the job of administering the discretionary fund.
And so was that the only funding that we allocated out to another group?
I know the other councils, we funded as well. So if you look at page, on page 182, you'll see about halfway down is the MV agreement. That shows those fund flows. So only a portion of that is the WDC work.
It's across the region, yeah, so projects in Far North and Kaipara also, they used Whangarei District Council as the receiver of the funds and the distributor of the funds without giving us any compensation for the pleasure thereof.
So we took it a long way through, is it been problem?
No. Yeah. Any further discussion on the financial report? I'll put that motion. Those in favour, aye. Aye. Against? Carried. Item 8.2, our capital projects report for February 2021. Recommendation is that the Council notes the capital projects report for the 8 months ending 28 February 2021. Do I have a mover for that motion? Councillor Hulse is moving. Councillor Peters is seconding. Any discussion? Councillor Hulse.
Here's just one on page 187, Parakeet transition mast upgrade, and it's going to be signalled we're going to carry it forward. Is that the plan?
My understanding is that that project is not yet due to proceed. We're still sort of reassessing all the storm damage that happened and realigning roads and various things. Oh, Alan's got a...
There's sort of ongoing work with Hartley regarding what that process will look like. There's a little bit of issues to work through before the physical works.
Well, just on that, we actually set a date to have all that information back to the council. So why didn't it routine received by officers?
Ongoing discussions, is that?
And the other one on page 192, I congratulated the staff on the last meeting. I'll do it again.
that red line's tracking where I think it should be all the time, and it's going exceedingly well. And considering it took 4 years to get to that position, I'm pretty happy with that progress. Keep it up.
It's exceedingly fast in local government terms. Any further discussion? Councillor Reid?
Thank you, Worship. I want to see here under transportation, we very, very thin layer of people around our district. 788,000 we spent 80 million on transportation. That is a worry. Okay, so that's on page 188. Transportation. We seem to spend vast amounts on streetlights and very little on.
Oh, I think that's a little unfair. I think the sealed road pavement rehabilitation, resurfacing and the minor improvement projects take up the bulk of that. So you've got 4, 8, 11 and others. I don't think amenity lighting at 0 really qualifies.
Just gravel on the ground.
Oh, there's help. Thank you.
Through the chair, yeah, we have identified that the unsurveyed revenue budgets within this current LTP program are probably lower than designed. And part of the currently under review submission, there is an increase to those budgets reduced from NZTA, okay, but that is still part of the whole moderation process of the finance application. So within the end, there is data to support an increase in funding in that city.
Following on from that, Worship, I've got areas named in Kapiwala here that are screaming out for some road.
You're not alone yet. Simon, did you want to add?
I was just going to add that spring and autumn are the main times we do most of the sealed network. During the dry summer period, it's very difficult to do much further. So as we get into autumn, the ground gets a bit of moisture and so
Thank you, Simon. Thank you, Councillor Reid. Any further discussion on our capital projects? I'll put that motion. Those in favour, aye. Aye. Against? Carried. Item 8.3, Whangarei District Council 2021 Credit Rating Upgrade. I would have great delight in moving that the Council receives the 2021 Standard & Poor's Global Ratings Credit Rating Report and notes its contents. Do I get a second? Yeah. I had to get in quick on that one, Councillor Dean. I knew you'd be hands up. It was actually noted in our risk and audit meeting yesterday, also by the independent chair, who had obviously read our agenda and was pretty impressed with this as a reflection on our council, because the Crown had its credit rating raised. That meant we had automatic upgrade status from ours to AA rating with a positive outlook. And it is the highest credit rating that we can receive at the time, but because we can't be rated ahead of the government, even though we're probably a little bit better. It is really pleasing to know that all of the financial parameters that we have been setting over a long period of time and sticking to those are showing in our credit ratings report, and that hopefully we can continue on that continuous improvement. I will open it up for debate. Councillor Cutforth.
Oh, just a question, Your Worship. I mean, it is great, and we've said that before, but I just was interested in what other councils received that rating.
Do we know, Alan?
Through the chair, I may get some of these wrong. Wellington, well, they, based on the next LTP, may not sustain that because of the infrastructure investment they made. Marlborough, Selwyn. There are Greater Wellington. There are 2 others, but I'm not sure. Although I speak like I'm not sure which ones they are.
I'm happy if you just want to speculate, just as an example. I'm interested. What I'm asking is, I'm just interested if there are any others that are similar, I guess, to us in terms of urban rural.
While smaller, Selwyn is probably the closest now, because they've had a significant increase in the urban space post-Christchurch earthquake. So there's a similar sort of profile. Is that mixed to ourselves?
Not every council has a credit rating, and not every council uses Standard & Poor's as their rating agency. There are others. We have some that do, but not all.
If we were to compare ourselves to other similar councils, such as New Plymouth, especially New Plymouth, maybe WH+, certainly Hamilton, Napier, Hastings, Carrama, we are above all of those.
Thank you.
Councillor Reid.
Just a quick one. It's a half-way question and statement. I think that across the board we would quite likely have lower rates than the others with AA+. Well, under the additions.
Any further discussion? I will put that motion. Those in favour, aye. Aye. Against? Carried. We've covered off the confidential minutes, so that brings us to an end of our council meeting today, and I will close the meeting. Thank you very much to Rangiora for being with us, taking a day off work. Hopefully it's been of interest to you, and I look forward to taking you to lunch. So, thank you, councillors. We've got, it's at 3 o'clock, we're going up to